All right, folks, it's time for another edition of the online dinner party right here with Mark Lee. I just finished having a interesting and fun experience today. I had the privilege of being involved in a audio puppet show. That's right. Yours truly has never been a puppeteer, never done anything of that nature, but I did have the pleasure of meeting the haiku champion of the world, IPC, and he has brought me into his troupe. And though, therefore, I got to be the audio voice of Echo, Echo, Echo. So I had to have that fun thing going on earlier. So that was done earlier today, and that was done in a room in the Clubhouse. Y'all know that Clubhouse is an audio app. So that was my latest news of the day. So things still keeping busy here in Durham with a variety of activities, but this was actually a global event as there were people from New York, California, North Carolina, think one of the countries in Africa, and I think there might even be some people coming in from Europe and other places as well. So we have a troupe that is like the modern day version of the Muppets. So we're trying to bring the message of art activism and art positivity to an audience near you. So definitely that was a great privilege to get to play that role. Only had like about 2 or 3 lines in it, but it was still fun, especially since my lines are the closing lines. That's right. I get to close out the entire production, an hour-long radio Muppet show. And then yesterday I was over at the Hayti Heritage Center. Y'all know I was over there. I believe I had told y'all that on one of the other shows over the weekend because one of our local artists had gotten married, and this was his second time around. So big shout out to Mr. Bigelow, Mr. Willie Bigelow, and all of that. And then, of course, we also had things that had to go on just in terms of maintenance. So that's why I was there yesterday. But there are activities going on. As a matter of fact, I think we've got a skate party coming up, not this weekend, but the following weekend. So looking forward to that and looking forward to having that conversation and meeting and seeing people there. And of course, this past weekend was also Phoenix Festival. So we had people performing live outside with all kinds of music, everything from gospel to hip hop to a number of other sounds. And of course, the candidates were out there. It is political season. So the candidates were out there. I know I saw Deidreana Freeman. I saw Leonardo Williams. I saw definitely Elaine O'Neill, who is running for mayor, and a number of other folks that are on that candidate trail were there as well. And of course, you can't go to any festival without there being good food as well. So that was some of the things going on in my life. I'm gonna bring up a good friend of mine, and he's gonna bring up some of his guests and everything. And then we've got some other people that will be joining us as well, because definitely the online dinner party, we love having all kinds of conversations. But the first person I'm gonna bring up is a person that I had the pleasure of working with, and that was when we worked together at Measurement Incorporated. None other than Stephen Reburn, and he's a great gentleman, always a fun person to talk to. And this will be the first time that he's been on my platform in terms of a show, even though we would hang out and oftentimes sit there and wonder about the wonders of education, which is a field that he is involved in right now as well. But at the time, we were with a testing company. So I'm going to bring Stephen on and see what he's got to say and everything. So how's it going? Good to see my old friends here, and good to see you doing all kinds of great things in the community and just staying involved. As you can tell, I'm even getting new fields because I've somehow got talked into being part of a puppet troupe, which that's fun and everything. So I somehow got talked into being part of an audio puppet troupe, but sometimes you just get talked into doing interesting and innovative things in the world of education. And like I told you before, when we were working there at Measurement, I definitely come from a field of education. Mom was a guidance counselor before getting involved in the field of philanthropy. One of my aunts was both a teacher and a principal before, unfortunately, MS took her life and everything a few years back, and along those lines. But definitely still have other aunts that are still part of that, because my Aunt Vaughn is a retired teacher, and my Aunt Julie is a retired medical librarian. So all of those, in my mind, are part of the educational field. And I know that you are involved in that as well. And I know that one of the things you're involved in is those lovely kids of yours. And I know that they are engaged in some amazing things. And I was actually talking recently on this show with a guest who is a single dad. So he was talking about some of the wonders of that. And he, in his case, was an orphan. So Alex Chambers was on my show last week talking about what it's like being a single dad, particularly as he's job hunting. And his daughter, Carter, has become the star of LinkedIn. It seems like every time that he pops on, she pops on as well because she's 4 years old. And as you know, from when your kids were 4, they're oftentimes very precarious. And they're also, they sometimes, you think that they're 4, but they act like they're 34, even at that age and everything. Your kids are in those teenage years, but I'm sure that sometimes you're looking at them going like, are you actually my daughter or are you like my mom?
Well, especially Annika, my 15-year-old, who thinks she runs the show around here, and she probably does. So. But yeah, good to see you, Mark. It's been a while since I've actually laid eyes on you, so I appreciate you having me on your show. And now I have to tell you, I can't get this image of you as a Muppet out of my mind, but I'll work on that. So so it's good to see you. I appreciate you having me and the other folks from Augustine Literacy Project on. It's an important organization that's doing amazing work, and Lori and Charisse, the other guests on the show, they do all the heavy lifting. I'm just trying to raise awareness of the organization and hopefully raise some money. We do great work, and there's more money for us just means more ability to serve more kids. We can train more tutors. We can get them into schools. We can serve more kids. We have a GoFundMe campaign going on right now. When we did the math, we're trying to raise $25,000 for that. And if we raise $12,500, we only need to raise half of that. We get a $12,500 match from one of our donors. So we were looking at what exactly $25,000 would mean for us. And what we figured out is that would mean 83 new tutors. And as you can probably imagine, Mark, there's no shortage of kids who can need our services.
No, I can definitely imagine that and everything. And I definitely want to bring on the other ladies as well and bring them on to share with this mission. And I do think it's a wonderful mission. Like I've mentioned, I know that Jerry Ann King, a friend of the family, was involved in one of our local literacy projects and everything. And definitely she's talked to me for decades about the importance of literacy and the importance of us getting more of our folks to be involved in that space. But I talked backstage briefly to Miss Fredericks. I'm going to bring Miss Fredericks on and have her share a little bit about what her role is. And then I'm also going to bring in Lori Easterlin as well. So if you could, definitely, I'd love to hear from both of you, y'all's involvement in this amazing project that Mr. Rayburn had turned me on to and everything. And I don't know how y'all managed to work with this man, because as I can tell you from having worked with him before, he can be a lot of trouble and a handful and all of that, but only in a good way. So Ms. Easterlin, tell me a little bit about it and everything.
Yeah, so the project has been around for over 25 years, and it was started by a group of church parishioners at Church of the Holy Family in Chapel Hill in 1994. And it started as an outreach for the church. And the reason it was started is that the parishioners had noticed this disconnect between children who learned to read and needed a tutor that could pay for a tutor versus those without the resources who just didn't have that opportunity. So the project was started to stand in the gap for the kids that have every much as a right to read as anybody else. So that's how it started, and it grew and grew. We celebrated our 25th anniversary, I guess, 2 years ago, but only became a 501c3 organization 6 years ago. So for all that first 19 years, it was a church outreach project. But that's what we do. We train 60 to 70 tutors a year. And what we do works. The curriculum works. We're based on the science of reading, which is the big, you can't turn on anything without hearing a lot about the science of reading. It's what all the schools in North Carolina have gone back to. We've been doing that for a long, long time. So, and I've had the privilege to be here for 5 years now as the executive director. with amazing people. Stephen's good. Cherise is amazing, but I'll let Cherise talk about her programming.
Yeah, I would love to hear from Cherise as well. And I was curious about the demographics because I know that a lot of times we think about who's being impacted. We know that there are a lot of dreamers here in the area, people from the Latin American community. We also know that there are a lot of African American students because we oftentimes hear about the gap that exists in that population as well in terms of some of the scores and things along those lines. So it seems like those are probably two target areas that y'all are trying to target and everything along those lines. So Cherise, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, and also if you just want to share a little bit about your own involvement in this whole process and how you somehow got roped into working with Mr. Rayburn.
Sure. Well, I'll start off by just talking a little bit about the demographics. I'll let Lori break down the figures a little bit more for you, but a majority of the children that we serve, all of the children that we serve are from low-income households, but a majority are from the African American community here in the Triangle or from the Latinx community. We do have a small percentage too of white students that we serve who really still need the additional help, and whose parents would not be able to afford the services otherwise. So that is one of the first criteria to become an Augustine child or student, is that you do need to meet the income requirement because we are providing these services free of charge as we train tutors, and we need more tutors. So in addition to Stephen talking about our GoFundMe campaign, we are always recruiting additional volunteers, always. I actually started off as a volunteer with the organization back in 2016. At that time, our trainings were 2 weeks long. So I actually went through a 2-week-long training. I've been an educator for 25 years. I was actually teaching, or just finished teaching, high school English at the time. I had seen firsthand the number of students that entered my classroom as 9th graders that were still struggling with decoding and encoding and being able to read and write and spell. And so that was really frustrating for me as a classroom teacher. So when I found out about this particular organization that was providing incredible training using research-based, evidence-based instruction, making sure that we were really teaching children the basic building blocks and fundamental skills that were going to enable them to read successfully, I signed up right away. As a matter of fact, I found out about it by reading an article in The Voice that I picked up at the public library while I was working with a student. And Deborah Watkins, who was also another amazing volunteer with our organization, who started an academy called Gift of Knowledge Academy, where she works with kindergartners and first graders. She was sharing her story about how her and a group of retired teachers had gone through the Augustine training. And immediately I picked up the phone and called. Debbie McCarthy was the executive director at that time and said, I want to sign up for this training. Because I saw that they were using some Wilson Language System materials. And for people that are familiar with Wilson Language Corporation, it's been around a long time. They use an Orton Gillingham approach, but the Wilson training is really expensive. And I remember being a classroom teacher and asking my administrators to put me through that training, and they just didn't have the money in the budget to do it. So when I found out that the Augustine training was only $300, I said, I'm signing up. When's the next one? When can I get involved? And I actually worked with a student from 2016. He was a 2nd grader at the time until 2019. When he went to 5th grade and was reading at grade level by that time. He's in middle school now. He goes to Lowe's Grove Middle School. And it really was a rewarding experience because I saw firsthand as a volunteer how effective the program is from inception. And also as a classroom teacher, I knew how important and how much we needed it. So in 2019, I got a call from Lori. I went to a couple of information sessions and they needed an administrative assistant. So she invited me to join the staff. So I started off just doing some admin work and then assisting with whatever needed assistance. And then the pandemic came, it hit, and it really threw us for a loop because whereas we've been doing those 2-week-long in-person trainings, we had actually cut it down to about a week-long training, 5 days. We realized that during the pandemic, when we weren't able to meet in person, especially at the beginning, we were not going to be able to sustain that model long term. And we had to shift our training to an online platform. So fortunately, we had a really great partnership with the Hill Learning Center. And so we were able to use the Learn Upon learning management system to develop a dynamic online tutor training course, which we now use. We've only been doing our trainings online for the past year. We're getting ready to do our very first hybrid training this month, at the end of the month, starting in 2 weeks on October 21st. So now we will actually start with our online training course, and then we'll have a couple of in-person sessions for our trainees to go through, our volunteers to prepare them. And the best part about it is it's no longer $300. It is now free of charge. We did not want volunteers to have to pay to go through this training. So we're now able to offer the training for free because of generous donors like the one that has agreed to make this match. But we do still need support. We need help raising additional funds so we can continue not to charge for our trainings as we continue to do them online and in person. But it's effective. The training is excellent. It works. We have seen many children that have advanced 1 or more grade levels after working with an Augustine tutor. But as we've already stated, we definitely need more funds, and we definitely need more volunteers. So if you're listening and you're interested, go to augustineproject.org and sign up. I'm interested in becoming a tutor, or please make a donation.
Sounds great. And we've actually got the website going across the screen so that folks can click on that and hopefully do that in terms of supporting. I also understand that there is a GoFundMe campaign as well. So definitely, I know that that's going to be something that's going to be much needed as well. One of the things that I was curious about, Ms. Lori, and everything was that this has been a time where a lot of people have been very much gaining new respect for teachers. I know that I believe it was Shonda Rhimes that was the television producer said that she feels that teachers need to get paid a lot more than they've been getting paid. And I know that that's been an argument that's been out there for a number of years. And I would agree with that, having my folks being involved in that education space. Even Dad was a college professor at one point or another, even though he's now known more as an artist. But I was just wondering your thoughts about that, because it does seem that people have gotten more respect for teachers, even though teachers are still struggling for pay and things along those lines. So I'd love to hear your thoughts along those lines.
Well, I agree with you. I think there is, there's been just a turn in the way families and parents and all people view teachers, as they are the most important thing we have. We know that because we're educators, but to see the general public really come behind that is such a good thing. One of the things we do with our training is we are able to we're going into 2 schools this year. We'll be tutoring outside, but it'll be our first entree into face-to-face tutoring instead of the online. And we'll be tutoring outside in tents. And the tutors will have the opportunity to take a child who's tested in the lowest of whatever the reading scores could be. They will tutor a child who would otherwise be in the classroom in small groups for literacy. And this way we get to pull them out, which gives the teachers a break. Instead of having a larger small group, we can pull the ones that really, really need it out for 30 minutes and come in twice a week and tutor them. And I feel like we're helping, anything I could do for a teacher. I mean, what they've gone through in this past year is unbelievable. And there's shortages everywhere, along with cafeteria workers and bus drivers. So they need a lot more. They need more salary for sure. But I do think there is a change in our perception of teachers and much more respect for them.
It's interesting you mentioned cafeteria workers, because yes, they need a lot of respect as well. That was actually the field that my grandmother on my mom's side, so my mom's mom, she was actually a cafeteria worker for a number of years in the small rural town of Hollister. So she was actually, that was the main job that I always knew her to have for as long as I can remember. And definitely a lot of the kids were able to relate to her, and they were able to relate even to some of the custodial staff and some of the other people that are very important. And I know that even some of those on the athletic side are important as well, be that coaches or mentors or other people along those lines. So a lot of times we don't think about some of these peripheral jobs as well. I think that I had mentioned earlier before y'all got on to, and might have been, and Noah mentioned it in phone calls to Stefan and everything. And I think I mentioned it to you, Ms. Fredericks, and everything. One of the things that this network was founded on, meaning the International Broadcast Media, was this concept of there needed to be reforms of a lot of things, media being one of them, but education being another. I know that one of our co-founders, Nick Palveda, talks about the time that he feels that of some of our education, and he would argue probably the majority of it, is kind of stuck in the 18th century, and we're in the 21st century right now. So he would like to see more tutoring done, not just of traditional topics, but also kids learning like financial literacy and learning about some of the things that exist, like computers and things of that nature, and maybe even learning some of the STEM kind of fields that are out there as well. So I know that he's a big supporter of trying to do things along those lines. So even though you're concentrating primarily on literacy, are you also looking at some of those other outside fields within the tutoring that you're doing? And do you agree that it should be done? And that's actually for both you, Lori, and you, Sharice, if you have any thoughts about that part of education.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I definitely agree. There's a lot of changes that need to be made in education. And the first thing is making sure that all children are getting what they need. One of the things that we know is that children learn differently. One of the great things about our program is it's a multi-sensory approach. So even during our lessons, we're doing things where students are reading things on the screen. It's visual, it's auditory, it's kinesthetic. We have songs and things they can sing, videos to watch. They're using their hands, even their fingers to draw on tables or burlap squares. It's important to have a variety in anything that you're teaching. But also, in order to access STEM, to be able to do some of the other things they're going to need to be able to do, they're going to need to be able to read. So we just look at ourselves as being a part of the basic foundation, making sure that every child is going to be able to read in whatever activities they're engaged in. You mentioned financial literacy. Just think about when you're banking or when you're reading a contract, how much reading is involved, in the financial world. And it's just really, really important that people can read, what is being put before them, and they don't have to struggle, that they have those, at least those basic foundational skills to be able to read some of the most important things, some of the most basic things that we encounter in our daily lives. So, we definitely aren't trying to do it all, but we are definitely trying to partner with organizations and basically partner with families to make sure that their children are getting the resources that they need at an early age. So that's one of the reasons why we primarily focus on placing our tutors, at least initially, with first, second, and third graders. We want to make sure that by the time they're getting to the 4th and 5th grade, they're at least proficient in reading, and they're going to be able to do those basic things that they need to do.
That makes a lot of sense. And I know that another thing that sometimes comes up is actually comes up on some of our other shows. I've got a good friend that does a show called The Gamers Den, which is about the video game industry. And he actually uses that as a platform to talk about things that parents and their children may talk about in terms of issues, whether that's things around inclusion or whether that's things around climate, because a number of these games are involved in those kind of fields. So as he puts it, he doesn't think there's an issue that you can think about or something that happens in your life that you can't find a video game about it as well, somehow related to it. But that being said, we do know that a lot of times kids become very much engaged in those video games, and they also sometimes there are some people that would say that that takes away from their attention span kind of situation. So that sometimes they're so engrossed in the game that they might be less attentive than we would like them to be in education. So I was just wondering, in this program, are there ways that you try to get the people engaged if they are still not as if they're still caught up so much in that video game mentality, for lack of a better term?
Well, right now we have online tutoring, and in the next 2 weeks we'll move to having about 20 tutors for face-to-face. But our online tutoring is so engaging for children. It's bright colors. The woman that developed it for us just had a flair for virtual tools that we could use that would still be engaging for the child, and that's worked out really well. I don't, first graders, they're pretty wiggly. I don't care, it doesn't matter. And there's a time limit as to how much you can get from that child while he or she is still sitting or maybe in the room. But it's so I think ours works well. And the one thing I wanted to talk about is our partnership with Ignite Online Academy, which is Durham Public Schools' new charter school. We are their reading intervention. We'll have 25 tutors at Ignite in about 2 weeks, tutoring first through third grade. And that platform exists because they're kids who they have anxiety or just don't like being in a classroom. And so their behavior when they're in front of a screen is much better. They learn better that way. They don't have they're not anxious about anything. So that school, which has 400 students, K-12, has done a remarkable job of that's an option for all students. And so I don't know. I think kids are wiggly, to be honest. You know?
So they probably are very wiggly. That's very much true and everything. Speaking of kids being wiggly, I know one thing that me and Stefan were talking about is how they can be vastly different even if they're close together. Like I said, even though I've got my two nephews, no kids of my own, I can tell you that Langston and Julius are very different kinds of personalities. And I remember that that's what you were saying, Stefan, about your own daughters and everything about how they are vastly different as well. So I was wondering how, when you have people that are vastly different, and if you want to share, Stefan, a little bit about that differences, because I think if one of your kids is being more athletic and maybe the other is being more artistic, that's just the way I've always visualized them and everything.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's true. You hit it right on the head. I mean, like it's really fascinating, this kind of lab, that we have going on, parenting children or in schools. We have them for a short period of time, but makes you really realize, made me realize as a parent just how kids come into the world as their own unique selves, right? And the best I can do sometimes just kind of stay out of the way and let them be who they were destined to be. So, but yeah, they're very unique individuals, and to think that they, had pretty much the same environment and the same genes, but to be so vastly different. And they're very close to each other, but 3.5 years apart in age. But they're as different as night and day in their interest and their personality and their focus and their what drives and motivates them. So I think that's just an example of what I can't imagine. The challenge of teachers having a classroom of all these unique individuals, coming from all these different backgrounds and family experiences and all of that. So, but one thing I wanted to just emphasize, Mark, if I may, when you were talking about the need for intervention in terms of financial literacy and focus on STEM and all of that. And Sharice definitely touched on this, but if you can just imagine, I mean, if this is really being involved in this organization for just a short period of time has made me kind of remember, the early grades of my school experience, and just about to start thinking about it a little bit. By the time you're in 3rd or 4th or 5th grade, and if you can't read, I mean, that doesn't just affect reading. I mean, that affects science and social studies, and even math has reading problems. And I think that's why it's just an organization like ours is so profoundly important, is because the school system just doesn't have the capacity to meet all of those needs, right? And so these kids, if we're not reaching them by the time they hit middle school and they can't read, and as classes get and you're reading a novel a week in English class, we lose those kids. I mean, that's the reality of it. We don't just, they don't just perform poorly in school. We're losing these kids because they they start having behavior problems and dropping out of school and being absent, and we lose them. So I think it's more than just helping kids learn how to read better. I mean, I can't think of anything that and Mark, I've been involved in a lot of different nonprofit organizations, mostly child-serving organizations, and I've considered myself a child advocate and parent of children, and but it's I can't really think of anything that we could be doing that's more important than what this organization is doing. So, and I think it's that we're targeting the earliest grades. There's other literacy programs in Durham, but we're the only one that's focused on this particular age group. We're focused on the early elementary age group, so that we can hopefully turn the tide quickly earlier in their educational experience so we don't lose them. So
Yeah, and that's a big danger and everything, because as you were talking, I was thinking about even the other side, not even the advanced courses, because you can definitely talk about financial literacy and the STEAM fields and everything. But there are also the need for reading just in the basic life and everything, because if you want to understand your civil rights and things of that nature, it's kind of hard to understand the Bill of Rights or the Constitution if you can't read it. So definitely you need to have the ability to read it. And the same thing can be said around vocational fields, because I know that one of the things that they talked about within the network is the need to have more of those vocational training going on in the school, and that used to be very popular. And unfortunately, some of our schools have taken that out of the schools, just like they've taken art out of the schools. But it's kind of hard to study Picasso if you can't read about his life and things of that nature. And even in the field of auto mechanics and the field of welding and a number of those others that are vocational fields, sometimes they even make more than the doctors and the lawyers, you still need to be able to read those instruction books and things along those lines. So it's the field that is needed in all kinds of aspects of our society. So I'd love to hear from you, Ms. Lori, about that, because I think that sometimes people are thinking that it doesn't impact so much of our society. I know that even day-to-day things that we do regularly, like learning how to cook, as I remember that one of the reading stories that I tell is that I am an avid reader. My brother is a pretty good cook, and part of the reason that he's a pretty good cook is because there's a 7-year gap between us. So when I was about 10, or I want to say I was maybe 11 or 12, and on top of our shelf was a cookbook. And I think that if I remember the story correctly, my brother kind of climbed up onto the oven, grabbed the cookbook, passed it over to me, and then my job was to read him the instructions of the cookbook. So since that day, he's been a good cook, and I've been a good reader. So my cooking skills haven't improved much during that time, even though I can't do better than just boiling water for a hot dog or an egg. So I've at least got a little bit better, but it's not masterful skills.
Well, I think you've got a good partnership there with your brother. You've got the skills kind of separated, and seems to be working. But reading not only affects the individual, but it affects, like you say, their vocation. It really impacts the community. If you think of a child that doesn't read by middle school, they're not going to read as an adult. It's likely they won't read as an adult. So if they live in a neighborhood, they can't really participate because they can't read. They go to doctors and they'll be prescribed medicine and they can't read those prescriptions. So it's about health. It's about jobs. It's about belonging. It goes down. I mean, equity in education, it goes right to its core with reading. And I have a friend who I think he's 65 now. He learned to read when he was 58. Yeah. And that I met him as he was learning to read. He struggled mightily growing up. One of 12 kids, he was socially promoted on and on and on, and didn't read, and then dropped out of school and started getting in trouble, and then kind of got himself together and got lots and lots of entry-level jobs. He worked at a bakery. He worked changing oil, just lots of, he drove trucks across state, but he didn't know how to read. So when he would do a good job, and then he'd be up for promotion, and then his boss would ask him to read something or set the order for groceries, and he couldn't do it. So he always got entry level, but he couldn't make that jump because he didn't know how to read. But then he learned to read later through the Durham Literacy Center, which is, they use our training. They're fabulous. One of our board members works at the Durham Literacy Center. They kind of we're early elementary, and Durham Literacy Center can provide GEDs and same thing, just based on phonics, reading for adults. So, you think people can think it's not a lot, that it's not that important, but when you start drilling down to see the impact, not just on the person, it's a huge impact.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely a very huge impact. By the way, I saw that my good buddy Tim Sohn was joining us, and he's coming in from Pennsylvania area. He's actually outside in one of those country towns and everything, but he was saying hello to all of us. And when I mentioned hot dogs, he was giving a shout out to hot dogs, and I'll give a shout out to his daughter. To his daughter daughters and to his wife. His wife is actually a school teacher there in the Pennsylvania area, and his two daughters are, of course, school age and all of that. So they have definitely been impacted by what's going on. And that's one of the other things. Y'all have kind of alluded to it, but how has the pandemic and COVID impacted the work that you're doing? Because I know that a lot of people, whether it's festivals, which I'm involved in, whether it's cultural arts centers, whether it's other aspects of society, even the company that me and Stefan have worked for before, were impacted by COVID and went to more of a hybrid model or more of an in-home model and everything. So I was wondering, how did the pandemic impact you, and is it still impacting you?
Yes and yes. When the pandemic started, we've been using for 20 years a paper and pencil model. The children had paper to write on. We had a lesson that we crafted to teach to them. Well, you can't do that if there's a pandemic and there's no school, and overnight the kids are learning online. But so that's why we jumped. Sharice and I both think pretty fast and take some chances, and we're able to develop this online curriculum within 90 days and have it up and running, which we haven't done anything like that before. We had no idea, but with our partnership with Hill Center, we were able to put it together. So it's impacted us a lot. Going forward, the biggest impact is that we're going to have way more demand than we have tutors for, because of the learning loss. If you think about it, a fourth grader right now, the last full year of school they have had was in second grade. And, they missed so much. And it's not the teacher's fault. The teachers were asked to learn how to teach online overnight. It's not their fault. But the kids have not been in school. So they've got a lot to catch up on. And I think that'll be our biggest impact, is trying to stay ahead of it, and knowing, that's our mission, that's our passion. We want kids that don't read to be able to read, improve their reading skills. And so that's what we do. So Sharice and I was like, you want to do that? Yeah, you want to do it? And we just go. And so far it's been working. We've been really fortunate to diversify our tutor pool and connect with lots of schools, Title I schools as partners. So I feel like we had a pretty good year last year, despite the pandemic. But it's because, these words are being thrown around all the time now. We were flexible, we were agile, we are resilient, we are all those things. And, it's good. So, but it's going to be getting kids caught up when they're really, really far behind.
Yeah, and that's definitely.
If I can add something, Mark, to that,
Yeah,
because I think it's important to understand is just that, and certainly Sharice and Lori can expound upon this better than I can, but how the pandemic has impacted our population of kids profoundly, right? Because these are already the kids who are at a disadvantage. These are the kids who are less likely to have the resources available when the school shifted to online learning. So not only are our kids, they're probably more disproportionately negatively, adversely impacted by the pandemic in terms of learning loss than the typical student. So we have a lot of work to do.
No, that makes a lot of sense. One of the things I was curious about from you, Sharice, and everything was, what got you into teaching? You mentioned that you were a teacher first, and then you came into this program. So what about the education field drew you into it? Because I'm always fascinated by people and why they go into the fields that they are part of. So were you like the young lady that was teaching the other kids as a youth, or were you the one that was like sitting there wanting to like give them lessons, maybe even making little mini classrooms and all of that? I'm picturing that might have been you, and then you just kind of like flowed into the teaching field and everything. So when did you first get that bite to want to be a teacher? And I actually think I'm going to bring in another guest today. It's coming to us all the way, if he's able to come on, from I want to say it's from Japan, but he is actually doing education overseas. So Dr. Wayne Brown, I'll be bringing up as well very shortly. I know he's been backstage waiting to join in the conversation around education and all of that. But what brought you into the whole idea of teaching?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked. And I actually want to tell a couple stories related to something you said earlier. So I think for me, it started just with my parents, and them always fostering just a natural curiosity in the world around me. So I remember being very young, but one of my first experiences with reading, when you were mentioning the cookbook, and your brother, is that even before I entered kindergarten, my parents got a young lady. She was a student at UNC. I grew up in this area in Chapel Hill and Durham. And she would just come and do activities with me at home or around the community. And one of the things we used to do when I first learned how to read was we would read recipes. She had this fabulous chocolate chip cookie recipe. And almost every other time we would get together, we would bake chocolate chip cookies. So that's like one of my first earliest reading memories of learning how to read, was just learning how to read just little short recipes of things I like to make. And of course, that was something very hands-on. I was also learning math. I was learning fractions. And so I think about all the things I learned just from that simple activity. But it also kept my curiosity, going. Because every time I would learn something new or learn how to make something new, I wanted to know more. So very early on, I had an interest in reading and learning. There were always books in our house, having a print-rich environment. A lot of times educators would talk about that, really, really important. That's why we're so grateful for other organizations in our community like Book Harvest and Book Babies that are making sure that families have access to books. Because that's one of the things that I think I've always had a heart for, is just making sure that people have what they need. And learning how to read increases accessibility to information, and just being able to learn more. And so that was part of the reason why I had an interest in teaching. Plus, my parents worked in education. My father is Ray Frederick, the coach of the Bouncing Bulldogs, founder of the Bouncing Bulldogs organization. So when I was coming up on the team, we were often teaching jump rope skills to kids, in this community. So I started teaching in a variety of ways when I was very young. And so I think it just came very naturally for me to want to help others, to want to serve, to want to teach others the skills that I was learning. And because I started reading at such a young age, I was constantly reading books all the time. And so I developed a love for reading, for writing. And then, of course, since I knew it well, I wanted to teach it. So it was a skill that came very naturally for me. But I recognized, again, as a teacher, that there were so many children in our community who have the ability to learn. They have the ability to read. They just have not been given the resources or the additional attention that they need. And that's why that early intervention, the one-to-one intervention that a program like ours provides, is so critically important at this stage. So again, I can't stress it enough. If you're listening and you're even thinking about you might want to volunteer, we need you, because the demand for tutors is always so much higher than the actual people that we have to do this work. So, that's why we keep going. That's why we shift. We need to go to hybrid and we need to figure out how to do it better online. That's exactly what we did. And one of the things you mentioned earlier was just about, adding in video and animation, and we want to do all those things. So one of the bonuses of shifting to an online training platform is it enabled us to do more of that. So we're able to incorporate into our visual presentation animations and more video and more things that are engaging for children, where sometimes in person, we're not necessarily able to do that, depending on what we have access to, in the learning environment. So online has actually opened up some opportunities for us to do some really creative things. And I'm actually really excited about that, to see how we can develop that further as we're getting more and more feedback from students and from teachers and from some of our volunteers.
Now, no doubt about that. And like I was saying, a lot of times people don't know the impact that teachers have, and they have a very big impact. As a matter of fact, I mentioned Tim, and Tim had this great quote. He said that I often feel like teachers are not given enough credit. People say that children lost a year of education, and I'm sure it depends on the school district, but I know many teachers who worked really hard to do the best for their children, and I would agree with that comment that he definitely made, and I would definitely agree with that. By the way, Ms. Frederick, you'll get a kick out of that, this comment I'm going to make. That puppets thing that I was talking about, one of the administrators is very much involved in Double Dutch, is very much involved in the whole Double Dutch concept. So there are several lines within the puppet dialogue that reference Double Dutch in there. So you're going to have to tell your dad that he has influenced a lot of people, including folks around the world, because it's got some Double Dutch references in this play called the Land of Matsu, and it's the Funky Eye Puppet. So it definitely incorporated. I did want to bring in because I've become a big fan of Clubhouse, and I met this gentleman off of Clubhouse. So Dr. Wayne, glad that you were able to join us. I know that you're doing a lot of amazing things in the field of education. You're working over there in Japan, and you're definitely over there having decided that you were tired of the California life and wanted to go work in the field of education, but in Japan, and you're teaching people about English as second languages and a number of other things. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about your story with our amazing guests here that are part of the Augustine Project.
はい、おはようございます。よろしくお願いします。私は Dr. Wayne Brown ですね。今からは5時ですね。So よろしく。Good morning, good evening, good afternoon for everyone who's watching. Yes, Dr. Wayne Brown giving you a call. I'm online all the way from Japan. It is actually 5:47 a.m. in the morning.
Morning.
So I've been joining you pretty early in the morning. What brought me to Japan? That's a great question. I initially came to Japan roughly over 20 plus years ago, and I started off teaching with the Japanese Ministry of Education. I started off teaching in the school systems, primarily in junior high school and high school as a recent graduate from college. And when I was brought over to teach, the program is called the JET program, Japan Exchange and Teaching Program. And I was actually placed not in Tokyo, which has roughly 25 million people coming in and out of the city on a day-to-day basis, commuters coming in from the suburbs, so forth, or in Osaka, the second biggest city. I was actually placed in a town of 16,400 people. I'm the only non-Japanese in the whole town. The experience was mind-blowing both ways. For example, I was the first Black person, African-American person that they've seen outside of television. So I was an icon in the city, in the town. People would come up to me, want to touch my skin, touch my hair, ask me numerous amount of questions. But what I realized was this. There's an element of curiosity that existed that really gave me the cultural immersion of being in such an isolated place that I could not have got anywhere else but being in that isolated place. The engaging situation was one where I was invited to numerous events via going to the beach, going to someone's house at least once or twice a week, dinner engagements, you name it, cultural events that were taking place, matsuris. The engagement was one that was fascinating and priceless. So with that said, that set the tone for my complete experience for now over 12 to 13 years, a journey throughout Japan. So what am I doing now? Now I actually teach at the university. I'm a university professor. Actually, it's a U.S. university, University of Maryland, their global campus, which are situated throughout Asia, throughout Europe, throughout the Middle East. They're primarily on military bases. Yes, U.S. military bases where they have these satellite campuses. So my students particularly are active duty. They are veterans, they are spouses, they are their children, and they are the Japanese who are able to pass the English examination so that they can actually take courses from a U.S. university. What's my subject area? I teach business administration, the undergraduate and the MBA programs. So that's what I currently do for academia, higher education. Personally, I have a program equally as well on the lines of teaching English as a second language, teaching English to students, TESOL program, which is teaching English to students of other languages, where it's a 20-unit course, 120-hour program, where you get a certificate at the completion of this course, backed by the TESOL Corporation in Europe, specifically the UK. And with my program, as I train prospective teachers who are native English teachers to go through the program, the accredited program that I just mentioned, afterwards, I'll do one-to-one training where they say, I'm interested in going to work in Japan. And in Japan, I'd like to teach English as a foreign language. I'm interested in going to China. I'm interested in going to Korea. That's in Asia. Southeast Asia, I'm interested in going to Cambodia, Singapore, you name it. I'm interested in going to Dubai, Abu Dhabi in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia. I'm interested in going to Costa Rica. All these countries, several of those countries that I mentioned, I've actually programmed and sent teachers to through my program. What does that encompass? You think about it from a practical sense of, I'm going to go work overseas. It's far more detailed. Means you need to think about health insurance. You need to think about accommodations. You need to think about visa sponsorship. You need to think about numerous factors which are considered all a part of a mobilization package. All of these things that I cover in my program. So I make it all encompassing. So from that student, that prospective candidate who says, I'm from the United States, I'm from North Carolina, I'm from Durham, I'm from Raleigh, you name it. And when they want to have that expat experience and they need more detail outside of just the fascination of I'm going to go live overseas, that's what I do. I prepare them completely for that exit and that overseas expat journey. So I'll leave it at that. I'm open for Q&A if necessary, but I thank you for this opportunity.
I appreciate it. Definitely appreciate you coming in and sharing what you're doing and everything along those lines. I was actually going to ask our other panelists if they had ever considered going to teach overseas or if they had ever had that experience. I know that Sharice, since her dad traveled all over the world with that Bouncing Bulldog team, has probably been to a number of countries. I don't know how many countries, but I'm imagining quite a few and everything, because I do know that y'all are internationally recognized as the Bouncing Bulldogs and all of that. And I know that you probably got a chance to travel to quite a few countries doing those double Dutch competitions, as well as the other forms of jump roping as well. So I was just wondering if y'all had ever thought about that. And then for our new guest, I was wondering if he had any aspects or access to tutors, because we know that tutors are very much needed in the program that y'all are running, the Augustine Project. So who knows, maybe he could send some tutors our way, all the way from Japan or from the places that he knows and things along those lines. So I'll start with you, Sharice, since I brought you up with the Bouncing Bulldogs, and I know that you probably traveled to at least, let me guess, 10 countries, maybe 15.
Bouncing Bulldogs have traveled to over 30 countries over the past 34 years. And one of the favorite countries that we've been to is Japan, because double Dutch is really big in Japan. As a matter of fact, my older son, the last time the team traveled there, which was actually in January of 2019, they went to a double Dutch contest in Tokyo, Japan. So yes, very familiar with some Japanese culture. We actually bring teams from Japan to our annual workshop when we're able to here in North Carolina, which we've had for over 30 years. Normally we have it at East Chapel Hill High School in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So yes, we love the cross-cultural connections, and that would be awesome. I mean, I can see it. I have now global vision for ALP. And again, we were talking earlier about what having to make shifts and changes during the pandemic did for our organization. But I think that's one of the things it's done, you know, with us now training remotely and being able to tutor online, which prior to the fall of 2020, we were not doing. I mean, it really has opened up some new opportunities. As a matter of fact, in our very first online training, we had a woman from the West Coast who actually tutored children here, you know, in the Triangle. And she was taking a year off. She was actually a reading specialist. So she was already highly skilled and qualified, but it was just something she wanted to do, a way she wanted to serve for a year. So again, we're always open to diversifying our pool of tutors. We've got several students from the Duke Service Learning, North Carolina Literacy Corps right now who are going through our training and using that and some of their volunteer work as well. So this is really exciting for me. It's a pleasure to meet you virtually, Dr. Wayne Brown, and really excited to hear more about what you're doing in Japan. But I think this is what part of what needs to happen in education is that there needs to be more collaboration. There needs to be more innovation, and then we need to be about the work of intervening when we see an opportunity to help people, especially our young people, be more successful.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up a question, and I'm probably going to get myself in trouble with a boss of mine and everything, and a former boss of Stefan's and everything. But it is one of those elephants in the room and everything. So I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts about this thing that goes on in education, which is kind of like teaching to the test. And we do know that that has gone on with certain companies and things along those lines. And even some people would argue that companies like Measurement play into that and everything. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about teaching to the test, and if that's something that we should be concerned about even in the literacy space. So I'm going to go with you, Lori, but then I'd also like to hear from Dr. Wayne as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it really does feel like the teachers don't have an option except to teach to the test, because the test scores are what are the things that are published, and that's how we are supposedly looking at the progress of these students. But I will say the reading in fourth grade, reading proficiently in fourth grade is a big indicator, and yet in North Carolina, and it also reflects the United States, 67% of fourth graders in public schools read proficiently in fourth grade. And that it hasn't changed in years and years. It's always comes up 67%, which tells you that teachers are really limited. And they're testing them way too young. It's just, I don't know. I've said this earlier, I would do anything for a teacher, because what they provide is so incredible, and yet they need more pay, more recognition, all of it. But the one thing we do to help with that is every lesson that's delivered to a child is planned by the tutor. And after that lesson, the tutor looks at what did the student do really well? What were some of the challenges? And then he or she prepares the next lesson. So all of our lesson plans are individualized for that student. So while we can't control how much testing is going on in the school, we can make sure that we're meeting the child where the child is. So we have to work on the testing, but we're trying to do our part this way.
Makes a lot of sense. Dr. Wayne, how is that being approached in other parts of the world, such as the East, Asia being, of course, a big part of that? But are y'all running into similar things with that whole concept of teaching to the test, or is that not even a concept there in Japan?
Yes, it exists. It exists. It's different, obviously, from the States. Here's a couple of reasons why. One of the things that I noticed when teaching K through 12 in Japan is the methodology in comparison to where education is presented at an early age in comparison to K through 12 in the States varies. The methodology here deals more with regurgitation and the art of practicing continuously until muscle memory actually takes place with learning. And what do I mean by that? For example, when learning the alphabet, the Japanese alphabet or the English alphabet, very simple. Regurgitation just says repeat again, again, again. It's done in the schools, but it's also taken home, or the school after school, which is called a juku. We also have these schools in the United States. They're called kumon. And the kumon also is Japanese word. So origins, I believe, still came from possibly a Japanese foundation just by the name itself. If not Japanese, it was Indian. But nevertheless, what you're seeing is one thing I've noticed by teaching not only in Japan, teaching in the Middle East, but also teaching in the States. I go back to the States. I often do substitute teaching in K through 12s in California, San Diego, is I see that the methodology, again, is different. You teach to a test just on the grounds of you need to get a score. And everyone wants to pass that test, proficiency. And the way in which scores are generated on a national level, which draws comparison, you mentioned how is it done in different parts of the world. Well, the OECD is an international organization that does assessments from all developed nations and includes several developing nations as far as the testing is concerned. What do they test for? They test for literacy, reading and writing. They test for math and sciences. They test for the social science skills. One thing that I've noticed when you look at these international scores, and it makes me ask some questions, is why are the Far Eastern countries, such as China specifically with Shanghai, Hong Kong, Japan, and Singapore, and Scandinavian countries equally as well, producing such high test scores across the board competitively much better than in the United States? Why is that? So then we need to go a little beneath the surface. And what we see is that the methodology that's education is presented in Scandinavian countries varies than the single student walking into a class where you sit at you have the teacher stands in front of the room, a single desk with 20 plus desks, individualized desks sitting down when you walk into the classroom, and the teacher lectures the students in many ways. Okay, there's Q&A, but for the most part, it's a lecture between one individual and the teacher. What you notice is that in several Scandinavian countries is that you walk into that classroom, it's more of a round circle table, and you have several students sitting around. So the thinking process of communication varies. It's not so much centered around the individual, the me side of saying, what are my test scores? Now we're saying, how do I work together with others and think and process this information? And not only process this information, how do we problem solve together? So the methodologies are different. Yes, you teach to a test. Of course, you must teach the information that's going to give you the best test scores, but the methodologies around how you generate those scores vary.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Stephanie, do you have any thoughts about that? Because like I said, I know you've been involved in education on a lot of the levels. You've also been, as you just said earlier, a child advocate, and I would definitely put you in that category. So I was also curious what makes you consider yourself a child advocate?
Well, I'll start with that question. I've just been involved with a lot of child-serving organizations for most of my adulthood. I started the Center for Child Advocacy and Research in California, and I started in a special needs adoption agency in Charlotte. And people started referring to me as a child advocate, and that kind of felt right. And then it shifted when I became a parent myself. It obviously became a lot more personal, and you started taking a look at a lot of the inequities and a lot of the the issues that we're trying to confront that affect children as a society. So I don't know. And in terms of testing, I think it's I don't really feel qualified to have much of an opinion on it. I know that I've been very, very fortunate that my children have been in attended schools that didn't put a high priority on testing, and that was like just a part of the conversation that was being had between parents and school administrators. Is that this is not that's we're more concerned about your child as an individual than we are about them meeting a particular benchmark in terms of testing. And I really appreciated that. And sure enough, we went to my kids have excelled and done really well. And I think would be considered successful students, but they attended schools that didn't have a really high success rate when it came to the test scores. So, and that was for the parents who put their kids in those schools, and myself included. I think that was just fine by us. So
that makes a lot of sense. One of the things I was curious about is what is needed by the tutors, because you mentioned the fact that you need tutors, and I was wondering what is needed by the tutors in order to even qualify as a tutor, because I know a lot of times people think that they can be tutors, but maybe they don't have the right skill sets, for lack of a better term, in order to be tutors, because you don't want just everybody tutoring your kids. So what is it that you're looking for your tutors?
You want me to take it, Sharice?
Sure, and I'll add on if I think of anything else.
Seriously, almost anyone can become a tutor. There are very specific skills that one has to acquire, but anybody can. Now, what we do at the end of a training, whether it's online or face-to-face, is after you've gone through the training and learned the skills, and you know that the sounds of all the letters of the alphabet, we put you're in a small group for a little while to practice teaching to a coach, which could be Sharice, it could be any of our other master tutors. And so we've got support for the tutors after they finish their training, And that makes a huge difference in the success of the tutor. So if you don't like little kids, it's probably not the place for you. But other than that, you know, the skills can be learned. And Sharice is the best trainer I've ever seen, and she does 99% of the training. So, but we don't let you out and place you with a child until we're comfortable that you have the skills and you're ready to be out and with a child by yourself.
Sharice, you mean you're not going to let me just read Curious George all day long to the kids and everything?
No,
or Paddington
our
Bear?
approach is very structured. So one of the things, as Dr. Wayne was talking, one of the things that I love about the Augustine program is it's very repetitive. So, you know, we can train anybody how to deliver an Augustine lesson, you know, as long as they're willing to practice teaching the phonemic sounds that they need to learn. But one of the biggest things is just belief. We need tutors that are going to believe in those students. You know, a lot of these students, you know, they're already frustrated. You know, they've been struggling with their literacy skills. You know, so as long as you believe in that student, right, and you're willing to allow us to work with you to be able to teach those skills to a child. And we do ask for a commitment, you know, because in order to be effective, we have found that a tutor needs to work with the student at least twice a week, you know, at least 2 30-minute sessions a week. So about an hour, you know, sometimes a little longer, maybe a 45-minute session. And as long as you're willing to be consistent and can commit, you know, we'd like for you to commit to at least one academic year, you know, so that we can have someone that's going to be there for that child, because it is a one-to-one, you know, one tutor to one child approach that we use. And you're just willing to stick with it and be flexible. Right now, we all just have to be flexible, and we have to be really patient. You know, I always tell the volunteers, not only with your student, but also with yourself, because we have people that come in with various degrees of technical skill. You know, so sometimes we have to spend a little more time on teaching them how to, you know, share their screen on Zoom or Google Meet or whatever other tools that they're using. But we can teach you how to do that as long as you're willing to learn. And be patient with that student, you know, to teach them the skills that they need to unlock the English language and be successful, you know, whether it's online or in person in this day and age.
Yeah, and speaking of being flexible, I'm going to bring in one other guest who I've had the pleasure of meeting through the wonders of the internet and things of that nature. That being none other than I know her as Vessi and everything, but she has definitely been involved in the music space and things along those lines. So how are you doing and how are things going? Definitely, hopefully you'll come in and join in the conversation, because they're sharing a lot, and I hope that she's hearing everything that I'm saying, because definitely looking forward to having her share a little bit about her involvement with the puppet troupe and all of that. Waiting for her to come on and everything while we're having that technical stuff going on. Wayne, Dr. Wayne, if you could, I'd love to hear you talk about more about how even the business teaching is going on.
Yes. So obviously, when I'm teaching, it's through English instruction. It would be no different than me teaching, for example, in any U.S. campus. It's just that I'm dealing with an expat community. The majority of the courses that I teach on the undergraduate level, from marketing to business management to Salesforce or numerous other courses, I always incorporate the domestic and the international sphere, obviously because we are international. And I think for a lot of my students, even though they're attending a U.S. University, they still come from the mind frame that they need to be made sure that they're reinforced to look at this from a global perspective. They are global, but they need to keep a global perspective on, even when operating and dealing with U.S. Strategies, the U.S. modules, or so forth. They need to always apply the principles to a international scope. And I think once K through 12, understand that what they do domestically in the small towns, in the cities, such as in North Carolina to California, nevertheless, if they realize that there's other students just like them learning subjects, just the same subjects that they're learning over the water, over the seas, in countries all across the world, they also now position themselves to think on a global scale. that's part of the education platform, of course, being a fellow teacher, that we must bring to the table. The teachers have to have that, bring that to the table so that they can also think like that. And one of the major issue is to realize too is education is extremely competitive. From test scores that we mentioned, from majors, college degrees that you're choosing, it's important that to also reinforce that college degrees will play a role in the whole trajectory of your life, right? What I realize is that you have schools here in Japan, for example, that the K through 6 is a school that the parents decide to go to in preparation to get into the appropriate junior high school that aligns them to the correct high school that will get them into the correct university that they desire. And that university actually has a certain degrees, certain majors, certain status, certain name and title to it, the same as which we do in the United States, right? From Ivy League schools to private schools, to great schools. But it starts at the K through 6 level. I'm trying to get my child into this elementary school so that they can go to this pipeline junior high school that gets them to the high school that gets them into the college. So that kind of reinforcement takes place at an early age. That's a model that is very transparent, right? Anybody can apply that. That's not specific. No one has a lock on that type of educational programming. We can do the same thing.
Ms. Lori and Ms. Cherise, how important do you think it is for us to reach our inner city kids just in terms of general education? Because I do sometimes feel that they get lost in the shuffle sometimes. I know that even sometimes when we look at test scores and things along those lines, and even access in terms of like access to books, access to equipment, sometimes they are not always in our school system as much as we would like them, even in the 21st century.
Right. Agreed. The children in urban areas are frequently overlooked. And, it comes down to the inequities in education. It's, are there books in the home? Does the family have connectivity? Actually, probably most people have a smartphone now. So anything we do online, is that adaptable? So someone can use a smartphone to get their work for the day. And then it even goes to basic needs. Frequently, cafeteria provides 2 meals a day for a child. So, it's about all of us, several organizations coming around to support that child and just raising the awareness. I mean, I think the pandemic, which is horrible, one thing it did do was just shine this spotlight on inequities everywhere. And we can't ignore it anymore. So I'm optimistic going forward that finally we're taking a look at the inequities that have just kind of been, just not there if you don't pay attention to them.
I agree in everything. Cherise, one of the things I was curious about, even coming back to the jump rope aspect, because I know you got to carry the golf, and definitely pick up that son of yours. I think you said it's the one that is doing the jump rope. But whether it was him or whether it was you, are there any favorite ones that you remember that were your favorites? Because I know that a lot of times kids are very much engaged with fun activities, whether that's sing-alongs, whether that's jump rope, whether that's whatever. That's oftentimes how we get kids engaged. I've even mentioned the video games. Like I know there's a game called, I think it's Rust, and then I know another one of my nephews loves one called Gorilla Tag, which I have not yet to figure out what that is. I think Rust is a shooter game. I'm not sure what Gorilla Tag is and all of that, so I need to figure that out from him. But I was just wondering, as both a mother and also a jump roper yourself back in the day, is there anything that you really resonated with in terms of the styles of a double Dutch?
The styles, absolutely. The Japanese style is one that I have found just very intriguing, and so have both of my sons. So I have an older son who I just mentioned earlier, competed in a double Dutch contest in Tokyo, Japan, and just their flair. Even their just flair for the imitation of hip hop and the way they incorporate, Broadway style theatrical performances into their jump rope routines is just really intriguing. Each year, the Bouncing Bulldogs go and compete at a holiday classic at the Apollo Theater in New York City. And they took that style, the National Double Dutch League, over to Japan, which was how a lot of the jump rope programs, the Double Dutch programs, got started in the universities of Japan. And so that cross-cultural connection is still evident even today, you know, from back in the early 80s. When the Double Dutch ambassadors of the National Double Dutch League went to Japan and were teaching Japanese university students this style of Double Dutch. And, you know, and so now we are able to travel back and forth, you know, to each other's countries and continue to share those skills. But I think for me, that's one of the things that it's what attracted me to wanting to jump rope. Honestly, it wasn't just the Double Dutch or, you know, jumping with the rope. It was the travel. It was the learning about other cultures. It was about being able to connect with people around the world. As a matter of fact, who I'm getting ready to go pick up from jump rope practice, who's now 5, my 3-year-old, and he started on the team at age 3. His very first international trip was to watch the Bouncing Bulldogs perform at a jump rope competition, a World Jump Rope Championship in Norway. You know, so as I listened to Dr. Wayne talk about education in those Scandinavian countries, one of the great things about when you get to travel through sport is we also get opportunities to visit universities, to go to school systems, do school shows in those countries. You know, so our children at a very young age get exposure, you know, to different styles of learning. And I think that's really, really important. And we need to do more of that here in the United States. You know, I know that was a huge deciding factor for why we sent our youngest son, Khalil, to a Montessori program this year instead of putting him in public school for kindergarten, was because of the outdoor education. And that's something we saw very firsthand when we visited some of the Scandinavian countries, even down to the way their airports were designed, because they had these play areas in every single airport that we went into in Europe. And it really, I remember listening to my child say, well, why do we have these play areas when we got back stateside? You know, he was asking everybody, where's the play area? Because he met children from Brazil. He met children, you know, from some of those Scandinavian countries that we flew through, because they just got together and started playing together, you know, right there in those indoor playing areas. And I think those are things that we can learn through collaborations like this, you know, just sharing information, communicating, and we can learn how to educate each other better. I know I've learned a lot today, and I'm really grateful. Thank you so much, Mr. Lee, for having us on your program today. But it's been amazing, you know, just to hear from you all and things that you're doing. I can't wait to find out more about the puppet show, because my child loves puppets.
Okay. So we're definitely going to let you know more about that.
Anybody who can volunteer for our organization, we definitely need more tutors.
Well, we're definitely going to try to get you more tutors. There's no doubt about that and everything. We actually do have some PlayStations out there and everything. Unfortunately, they are known as the airports and Las Vegas, because I just went to Las Vegas for the first time and I saw that the slot machines were waiting for me as soon as I got there. That was about like maybe 2.5 years ago, visiting a friend of mine. I'm sitting there. That was the first thing that caught my eye. I'm like, wait a minute, y'all are trying to get my money and I haven't even got to visit the friend yet. So y'all are trying to catch the money and all of that, because I think that's where it is. It's in Atlantic City, Las Vegas, and those places like that we have our own version of play. Hey, Stephan, I was just wondering, how important, because I know one of your kids was very much involved in athletics, so how important have you found that to be, even in the educational agenda that you put out there as well? Because definitely I found that you have definitely been involved in that space, and like I said, one of your kids seemed to be more engaged in athletics than the other, but I think if one of them is being athletic and the other is being the artist of the family. But how important do you think athletics is to your educational agenda?
Well, I think it's so Annika is the athlete in the family, and she's a soccer star and cross country and track, and it's cross country season right now, and that's why I'm going to have to head out at 5:30 to go pick her up from practice. But I think it's for her, it's been about identity and community, the whole, you know, the being on a team and being about, you know, being part of something that's bigger than herself as an individual, and the camaraderie. And, you know, and for her, it's, you know, it's, and this is something that I try to keep a little bit of a check on. She's also very results driven, and she's very committed to excelling in all aspects in her life, academically, and I have to just, I'm the parent that has to try to convince her to not, the child not to take so much on, and to take a little break and just to relax a little bit, that rehab and recovery is important. So, there's an obsessive quality to it that, I admit that we have to keep an eye on. But it's been, I think it's been mostly, at the end of the day, a real positive experience, mostly just for the team building and the camaraderie and the friendship and this comes back to tutoring as well. It's about having her coaches we've been very fortunate, who've always seemed to be, whatever sport it is, to take a particular interest in her. And that's what I've always found, and that comes out in my child advocacy. If there are people in your life who really believe in you and you can count on, then there's not much that can stand in your way. The other people, once you start feeling a little bit confident about yourself, and that comes from a lot of reinforcement, not just from your parents are always going to say that, you're doing a great job, honey, but it's when it's coming from other people, the kind of confidence that instills. And I see that with the tutoring. We have testimonials from kids who've gone through the program, and that I remember this one guy who spoke. I wasn't there, but I read an excerpt of what he said about how he went through our program, and when he started, he couldn't read at all, and he hated going to school, and he tried to skip classes, and he didn't do his homework, and he never raised his hand. He was afraid in class because he was afraid teachers were going to call on him. And then he went through our program, and within a year, he was reading. He was raising his hand. He was teaching his little sister how to read. He was, volunteering. He was, was proud to stand up at that function, Lori remembers, and give a speech. He was saying things like, now I can Google search, and you could just see in his words how just the pride and the self-confidence. So I think whether you get it from teachers or from home, or if it's not available at home, if you can look to outside resources, whether that's coaches or tutors or, wherever it can come from, just that, all of a sudden a light switches and you I believe in myself. I think that makes all the difference in the world.
I definitely agree with you. Hey, Nola, I know that we're going to wait and hopefully hear Jesse's music and lovely music and all of that, but I was just wondering if you could talk about the importance of art in education as well, because I know that you are definitely involved in that art space. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about the importance of art in education.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, hear you loud and clear.
This is all very exciting. I have to apologize for my appearance. I didn't realize it was an on-camera thing. But yeah, it's so exciting to hear all the different programs and innovations in education, and the routes that you're finding from formal education and formal adult education through these various programs. I love the emphasis on a camaraderie, on confidence, on life skills, behavioral skills. Learning how to talk to each other, learning small talk, as you say, play areas that we're in an airport where people can meet kids from other countries and even learn different songs, and it's all very positive in terms of raising the brains of the future to not only focus on winning and competition and business and formal learning, but just sometimes to have fun, just having fun, being told that it's okay to make a mess in the art room, being encouraged to create, to write poetry, to write songs, and joining in school bands. All of these things really round, as we all know, really round the whole personality, and it stems from youth. And yes, thanks very much, Mark, for asking me to speak about the public. This is
I was going to ask you if you could share a little bit about your own background and some of the things that you're involved with. I met you through IPC and the Funky Eye Puppets, but if you could just share a little bit about where you're located at in this great world of ours and a little bit about your own creative background.
Oh, well, I'm from Glasgow. I'm Nuala Norton. I'm a journalist of many, many years, freelance journalist, and initially started in investigative journalism, basically because I knew a lot of crackpots that had crackpot stories, and interesting, really interesting people in my life that allowed me to sort of start getting into investigative journalism. People had contacts that I didn't have, and then it followed from there, through the whole gamut of news and features. And in the past, during COVID, I took the opportunity to try to transition into voiceover work, which was really a big eye opener because people tell you you've got a good voice, you've got a really nice voice, you should do voiceover, and then when you go to start it, it's like an exponential learning curve. I didn't realize how much elevation one had to put into one's delivery, how much acting was involved in just delivering a line, for example. And the other thing is how many areas there are that you can actually get paid to just speak. And my favorite one is when you're standing in the post office or another outlet and you hear somebody go, "Cashier number 4, please." Someone got paid to say that. So it's very exciting. So then I discovered these audio platforms, which I think are wonderful, and at some way along the line, someone introduced me into the Funky Eyed Puppets, and I thought, well, there's no way I can act. I know I can't act. I can do a word or two and a sentence or two, but acting, no. But what I loved about it, what I fell in love with, was the inclusion, the openness, the welcoming of people of all ages, backgrounds and abilities, and the message of the Funky Eyed Puppets, which goes from animation to cartoons to storybooks, physical art, and songs and songwriting, and the whole story, all the lovely, fantastical, mystical stories, really are all reaching out to people, and kids in particular, which I think is adorable in terms of the variety of areas where we could slot into the education system in terms of developing character and behavior. It's so inclusive. A lot of the actual actors, and I wouldn't call myself an actor, but a lot of the actors have their own disabilities, have their own incredible stories that they've had to overcome, and they've overcome it through, as well as everything else, through art and music and poetry, and puppetry, and finding the Funky Eyed Puppets was just so marvelous because they're all crazy creatures with quirks like steampunk bodies and 3 eyes, and what they're really saying is come in and celebrate your differences, and explore your art and sing and write songs and try painting, try cartooning. IPC is our founder, and he stands for I Paint Creatures, and he tells these wonderful stories, and makes the puppets. And his big message really is, even in your darkest places, there's somewhere you can go, and just leave your worries around behind for a while, and just dream big and have confidence. And if you haven't got confidence, join us and we'll give you the confidence to spread your wings. And the stories behind them are so mythical and beautiful that you can't help falling in love with the stories as well. They're rooted in ancient Japanese, mainly, mythology and wisdom, and the message is just to be so open. And one of our members was actually up for a Grammy at the moment. I think it's a Grammy for her album, which is a children's songs album. So we're hoping that she has a lot of good luck there. Another one is has been nominated for an Emmy. So everywhere from that kind of caliber down to someone like me who really is rotten at acting, but I'm learning, and everybody brings everybody in. They help you to work on something that you're not good at, to work on your confidence. Even as an adult, we have confidence issues, and that's why I just totally fell in love with the Funky Eye Puppets, and I herald their story everywhere I go as much as I can. But I think it also feeds into the education system. There are ways that we can, include paint, art, music, dancing.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And definitely, I'm going to try to get the Funky Eye Puppets to maybe come to do something for the Augustine Project, and definitely maybe we can have that happen at a time that we can do a presentation for the Augustine Project. So I'm going to bring that to IPC and everything along those lines. And Lori and Stefan, you're not getting off the hook, neither are you, Dr. Wayne, because I'm going to recruit y'all to become Funky Eye Puppets. Because if I can become a puppet, anybody can become a puppet. So I've recruited y'all to become.
I don't know, but I'll think about it. I'm sure Stephen would be phenomenal.
Oh, Stephen could do it.
I'm sure once you see me, then you'll change your mind. And I'll the hook.
No, I don't know about that. I know that both of y'all have got to bounce. I'm going to continue the conversation with Dr. Wayne and Nola, and I'm hoping that Bessie's going to come on to give us some musical interludes at some point or another. But one thing, I meant to do it with Sharice, but I'll hopefully get her back at some point or another. But all of my guests, because this is an international platform, we are heard in over 125 countries and all 50 states and everything, is we like to give people an opportunity to, one, share their social media, and also ways that a message of positivity, a message of hope that they would give to the world and everything of that nature. So as y'all are walking out the door, I will start with ladies first. So I'll start with Lori, and then I'll come to Stefan as well.
Positivity. I would wish that all of us would come together and take a deep, hard look at the inequities that exist everywhere, and come together and let's make some changes. Let's make some significant changes.
I agree. And how can they find you on social media if they want to find you on social media? Maybe you're a member of Clubhouse, or maybe you're a member of Facebook, or some of the other ways. Of course, we've got the website going across, but how can they find you on social media?
Facebook. I don't really do Instagram much, but Lori Easterlin on Facebook is a good way to get a hold of me.
Okay. And what about yourself, Stefan? How can folks reach you, and social media and other things? How can they reach you as well?
Yeah, on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and all of that, it's just my name, Stephen Rayburn. I have the benefit of having an unusual spelling for both my names, so I don't have to add numbers or anything. It's usually just / Stephen Rayburn. So you can find me, you can track me down that way. But more importantly, I would encourage everyone to go to the AugustineProject.org website and learn about being a volunteer and ways you can contribute financially or other ways. You can find our GoFundMe campaign on the website on the top button, support AL PT. So I just encourage everybody to please do that. We need more tutors, and we need more money so we can hire more staff and have more tutors and serve more kids. So, and yeah, I just, if there's a parting thing, if you'd have given me a little bit more time, Mark, think about this, I would have come up with something profound. But I would just say that, there's a lot that you can despair, in this life. There's great sorrow. There's a lot of things we can, hang our head about, but there's also a lot of joy and a lot of hope and a lot of promise. And, when I'm around people like you guys, that just reinforces that. So let's just, leave here and never lose sight of that. It's a beautiful day. And peace and love. I'll leave it at that.
I appreciate the peace and love. I'm actually going to bring up Bessie. It looks like she's en route in her car and everything, but hopefully she'll get situated and everything. We'll get to hear the performance later on. But Bessie, how are you doing? Definitely, as I said earlier, I thoroughly enjoyed the music that you provided, the Funky Eye Puppets. We've been having a whole discussion around education, but we did bring up the Funky Eye Puppets and other things as well. So I just wanted to say hello and how much I enjoyed the performance. And we've been having a whole conversation around education and more. So definitely had the Augustine Project that was going across the screen earlier, and that's a tutoring program here in North Carolina. But I've also had Dr. Wayne from Japan, who is involved in education over there. So we've talked a little bit about everything, including one of Quincy's favorite topics, because one of the people that was with the Augustine Project is involved in Double Dutch. So we were talking about Double Dutch, and we all know that that is a topic that Quincy loves. So I have to bring Sharice back on another conversation because she's competed, I think she said, in 30 countries because her father is the founder of the Bouncing Bulldogs, which is a champion Double Dutch team based here in North Carolina. But she's involved as one of the tutors for and tutor trainers for the Augustine Project. But she is raised in Double Dutch. So, as I'd like to tell Quincy, she's raised in Double Dutch. So I know that that's part of what we talk about, even in the Funky Eye Puppets, and all of that is having those Double Dutch elements, and even that being part of the music aspect as well. So, if for those that are watching, if you can share a little bit about your musical background, and hopefully at some point we'll get you in a stationary spot where we can hear some of the music. But definitely, if you can just share a little bit about your musical background, and I think Dr. Wayne may have to leave shortly as well. But before he does, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your musical background, because like I said, I know that our listeners are always fascinated by the amazing things that happen in the globe.
Thank you, Mark Lee. Hi, everybody. This is Bessie Mink coming to you from a parking lot in Algonquin, Illinois. I'm returning the car. We had a car that needed to be fixed. Yes, it's been a whirlwind of the day. The Black Cat was waiting on the front lawn for us after the Funky Eye Puppet Show. So that's all we need to know, right? That we're all here for each other. I'm a singer-songwriter from Chicago. I grew up in Chicago. My parents are from Bulgaria and Germany. And I write songs. I gift songs. I'm the musical director for the Funky Eye Puppets. I'm vibrato. That's my character. And I get people to sing. I get them to be excited about music. They get me excited about music with their stories and their beautiful, unique hearts. I'm here to bring people together. I love all education that has to do with deriving from one's story and personal journey. And I write songs about it. For instance, I've written already 5 songs for children in elementary school this year that just didn't want to go to school. Some of them are now taking the bus. So with that said, I'm your friendly neighborhood songwriter, and I'm here to write your song. If you need a song, if you know anybody that needs to be uplifted with a song, I give songs. That's what I do. That's why I'm here. And the Funky Eye Puppets is something that's breathed life into me in a huge way with director IPC, whose story of Matsu making art together, supporting unity, is just rocking the whole globe right now, because that's what everybody really wants to do, but we're kind of stuck in these social constructs, and we need to figure out a way to make it happen. So with Robbie K's album, all on Robbie plays Juniper in the Funky Eye Puppets, and Robbie's a Grammy winner. Everybody on her family record is a Grammy winner, and so that song needs to win a Grammy, because we need to get it heard that families is where it's at, and supporting unity. Making art, supporting unity. We make art, but we're not always supporting unity. That's where we need to work on it. So I'm here at your behest. And would you like to hear a quick song before I go in and pay for my mechanic bill?
I would love to hear a quick song from you,
amount I
Bessie.
thought it would be.
I would love to hear a
Thank you, Mark.
quick song from you. I love Bessie's music, so of course I want to hear a song.
My website's vessiemink.net, but the songs aren't working right now. If you reach out to me at vessiemink, VESSYMINK@gmail, I will send you a bunch of songs in lots of different genres. I'm a children's music artist. I worked at the Old Town School of Folk Music for 4 years, basically leading parents with their children from newborns till 7 years old, just bringing in the music and writing music for children on the autism spectrum, and not bringing that up, by the way, in the classes. It was more of a matter of paying attention to who needed more of a song to kind of bring them back in. And I've found a lot of success with that. So the song I'm going to sing for you, I was in an a cappella trio in LA called the Smiling Minx with Susie Williams, an amazing chanteuse who's like Bessie Smith meets Greta Garbo, and Maura Smiley, who's a Bulgarian singing she's Irish actually, but she fell in love with Bulgarian music, and we had an a cappella trio. And had we not, I wouldn't have learned this song from Duke Ellington called Cottontail. And Cottontail was, this song was lyrically changed, brought about to its current, what I'm going to sing to you from, let's see now, Lambert Hendricks and Ross. There we go. That's what it is. I also wanted to mention popologynetworks.com because they're changing everything and everybody wants to get in on it because it's all about monetizing, making art together, supporting unity. And you can go into more of that going to popologynetworks.com. So here we go. Way back in my childhood, I heard a story so true about a funny bunny stealing some food from a garden he knew. His mama got worried. She told the bunny one day, better watch that farmer, heed what I say or blow you away. He knew his mama was right, so why don't he do what you say? Maybe he just don't dig it, worry's no habit, cause he's a rabbit. Hoppity, 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 hop and hop to stop and cop the crop. Out in the garden where carrots are dense, I found a hole in the fence. Every morning when things are still gonna crawl through the hole and eat my fill. The other rabbits say I'm taking dares. Maybe I do wrong, but who cares? I'm a hook rabbit. Yeah, got a carrot habit. Every day I'm trying to avoid it. Even though I know I've enjoyed it, really and true, I'm begging mama's pardon. All the time I headed for the garden, where everything is sweet when the farmer's napping. Every little carrot is a stone delight, but I keep forgetting that it ain't right. So one day when I was eating my fill, that farm pulled a real creeper still, came at me with a big shotgun, and then I run.
We had Bessie with the song and we lost her. How dare we? She's just a great job.
Yay,
I was
fantastic.
enjoying that song there. And, and it went out on the internet. That's the great thing about the internet. Sometimes it doesn't want to cooperate. Oh, Dr. Wayne's coming back. So I'm going to see if we can get Dr. Wayne's message in peace. And hopefully we'll get Bessie back as well. I was enjoying Bessie's song, but unfortunately the internet was not cooperating, but maybe she'll come back on in a second. But that was a great song. Dr. Wayne, I know that you said you got to get ready to bounce as well shortly, but as you heard me say earlier, I love giving messages of peace, messages of people finding ways to reach you, be that email or through Clubhouse or Instagram or however they can find you and everything, and any message of peace and hope that you can give this global community of ours.
はい、そうですね。本当に素晴らしいですね。本当に面白い方。So I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for that. And bringing me on your show. Definitely we can work together. I can come back and we can collaborate possibly on some other joint shows and projects. I just want to say you can definitely reach me at my website, which is www, of course, WEBII online.com. There you'll see the school that I mentioned, the training program. It works two ways. You're going to see one aspect works for the teacher trainer. That means the teacher who's seeking to work and find employment to work overseas to go through the training course, but also I have students that go to the website who are interested in learning English as a second language. So it works two sides. You'll be able to see that on the website. Once again, WEBII online.com. You can reach me at Instagram. Instagram is going to be my name, Dr. Wayne Brown. You can find me on Clubhouse, which is Dr. Wayne Brown equally as well. So the catchphrase is doctor in front. That's where you can always find me, give that point of distinction. And that's two forms. Let's see, Facebook. You should also be able to reach me on Facebook as well. Which is also going to be Web International Institute, Facebook, Web International Institute. So I believe that's about three forms of communication you can reach me.
Sounds great and everything. And for those that did not catch the message, since it was in Japanese, can you give us the English translation of the message of hope?
English message of hope. Think global, act local. And continue the forms of communication and put your vision in motion.
Definitely very important. Always good to put that vision in motion. Let's see if we can bring Bessie back up. The song was not acting correct earlier and everything. So we got through most of the song, but I think we cut off towards the end and everything. And it's trying to those moments where you might be located at and everything along those lines. So we're going to see if Bessie can come back and everything. What is your thoughts, Nola, just about art as activism? Because I'm actually a big fan of art as activism while I try to get her situated. But what is your thoughts about the importance of art as activism?
Well, definitely, because there are some quite graphic types of messages that kind of block you on the head and that kind of thing. But there's also there's the quiet revolution, the Banksies of this world, and graffiti as an art form works also very well as a political messenger. And yeah, I'm right into graffiti art. So yeah, in any form. I mean, so many countries we know, so many peoples have been subdued by not even being able to sing their own historical folk songs without being threatened to be put in jail for 40 years and things like that. It's extreme. That is how important art is in activism and politicism. When they try to stop you singing and saying your poetry and painting your paintings and doing your art, that's when you know it's a very, very powerful tool, very, very powerful tool in activism.
No doubt
And
about
even,
it.
and even subliminally, you know.
I think that sometimes they're scared of art and the power of art. And I think that that's sometimes the reason that they try to suppress us as artists. As I mentioned earlier, when Gia had come into our after party, and of course, that's Gil Scott Heron's daughter and everything. I'm a big fan of his music, but was also a big fan of Peter Tosh, Bob Marley. Definitely one of my favorite songs is John Lennon's Imagine, which is imagining a world where there are no wars and things of that nature. So that's actually one of my favorite songs, and definitely am a big fan of message music. So I was just wondering, Nola, at what point did you find yourself gravitating, even as a fan, toward art that is message oriented and maybe even activism oriented? Because like I said, I mentioned a few of those that I've enjoyed, and I can name some others like definitely Sweet Honey in the Rock and Ladysmith Black Mambosa that weren't afraid to use their music as a tool within getting out the message that they wanted to. And of course, we know one of the classic songs is Nina Simone's Strange Fruit, which was a big hit during the civil rights era and everything along those lines.
Yes, Billie Holiday is one of my absolute favorites, who wrote that song, as you know. It didn't really just happen. I didn't get an epiphany. I was always brought up in a politically active family. My father and mother were politically active. You know, I joined every union wherever I worked. I'm a member of the National Union of Journalism. So they and they of course take a lot to do with, oh my goodness, what's going on in a lot of parts of the world just now, with journalists being jailed for what you might say looking at me in a funny way, you know, means for anything. And I think, yes, I got into the art side of it through the music of Billy Bragg and even Bob Dylan, and you know, we all have some of our favorites where the message resonates with us. So yeah, I think I discovered a love for political, or not political art, but just art with a message, through finding out the terrorism that goes on in lots of countries in the world where people are actually meeting in, you know, candid rooms just so that they can share their poetry. And of course, there was those little dolls. I can't remember what they were in the Russian Square, and the band got jailed just for putting these little dolls on. Oh no, that's what they got jailed for having a political message, you know, against the regime. And then people started making these miniature dolls and putting them in the square as a protest. Thought that was absolutely so clever. But the art thing, yes, it just came through, I think, from being a writer, and meeting all these wonderful musicians and artists, and just being so awed and inspired as well by their strength, that they won't let their stories be untold, and they won't let their history be closed to the new generations. I think it's inspiring.
Oh yeah, it's very inspiring. When did you decide you wanted to be a journalist? Because that's actually my field of study. It's actually what I got a degree in, and I can tell you that for me, it kind of started with Watergate because I was definitely a fan of Woodward and Bernstein, having grown up in the 70s and definitely having studied Watergate, and definitely also a fan of 60 Minutes. So that's kind of where it started with me. But I was also a fan of what some people call gonzo journalism because I was definitely a fan of Hunter S. Thompson and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, as well as Fear and Loathing at the Kentucky Derby. So I was just wondering, at what point do you think that you got interested in journalism and particularly investigative journalism?
Well, I had intended to get into it in a different route. Go down the university route. I ended up being a university lecturer in journalism, having not actually got a degree in it. But it really, to be honest, it was my nosiness. I wanted to be. I had all these stories that I was hearing. I wanted to hear more about them. I was nosy to go on what's going on behind the scenes in places, and I was lucky to know people who had contacts that could help me like elevate a story. And I think my biggest motivation is always having to be the first with the story. I mean, if me and my friends were out for a night out and then we ended up on a party and there was a story to tell, we were all bursting in the room to tell it, and it was a case of who could tell it first and get the funny joke in as well. And so it was always about really, I should say being interested in people, but I just think being a nosy person and always wanting to get the story out first, and the most interesting stories, to tell people things they don't know about, to open their eyes and say, I did that, I brought that to you, and now go and do with it what you will. So yeah, just nosy. and also, knowing all these interesting people and all the stories, and just feeling that I shouldn't be the only one to know all the struggles and the inspirations and innovations. I just love being there first.
No, I can definitely relate to that. And I can also relate to being nosy because I'm also a little bit on the nosy side as well. I remember in high school going to investigate a story. I think we were going to investigate, and I carried a friend of mine who was going to be my photographer. And I think we were going to investigate like in-school suspension. So I think that's what the story was about. It was in-school suspension. And the, just even back then, the superintendent's receptionist or secretary was calling us over, like saying, that's not the story. You want the real story. And when they gave me the real story, I had to make a decision because they were basically trying to get me to report a scandalous story. And since I didn't have any proof of the scandal, I left that one alone and everything because it wasn't anything that was going to be, I knew that my publisher of the paper was probably not going to put it in there. And I also knew that it was not anything that I had proof of, and it was actually a little bit on the sordid side. So I was like, nope, don't think I'm going to go down that route and everything. But I definitely remember it distinctly because I'm like, but they wanted, I guess, the little cub reporter to come out there and practice their agenda. So they probably had an agenda of wanting to get rid of that principle or whatever. But since they had an agenda, I didn't have to fall for the trick. And I did not fall for the trick even at that young age, because we do know that sometimes people will give you a story because they want you to run with the story in order for them to practice whatever their agenda is as well. So like I said, I'll get into those details because they were kind of sorted. I will say that it was something that I didn't feel comfortable telling that story, so I left it alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get known for whether you're up for that or not, very quickly. And just leave it to the side.
When you were doing your reporting in Eastern Europe, what was one of the most unique or fun stories that you can remember, whether it was unique or fun, that you can tell us about? Because I know there's some investigative stories that you, like I just said, you might not have been able to tell or might not want to tell. But are there any that you can remember that were fun and or unique that you remember from your more active reporting days, even though you're still doing some reporting now, from what I understand?
I mainly do features now. I'm getting right into the depth of things. I'm right into longevity and age reversal and the science of aging and all that. I don't know. I think you always remember your first one that got, because I'm a print journalist,
Right.
but the ones that get the television producers and radio producers interested as well, was it was all about the a munitions factory that basically they had a reputation for certain a number of deaths that used to happen. They used to call it a Monday death, and what happened was they went home on a Friday, and then by the time they came back on the Monday, they were dying at work. And what it was they worked with nitroglycerin and cordite and explosives, really. And so they used to learn to sneak a little vial of nitroglycerin, but we called it keep it under your hat. They used to keep the guys used to put it under their cap to keep them going, because the nitroglycerin that they worked with would expand their arteries, and if they didn't, keep taking it, then they would end up having some kind of heart attack. And so what we discovered was, instead of making reparations or making it safe for people to work there, they just wait. People died, and they just paid off the family with handshake that said, "Will this do for you to not take this any further?" So that was my first real foray into coming up against quite threatening situations. If you keep this up, it won't be good for you. And but that just gave me a buzz as well. That made it more important for me to get the story out. So that I probably have a lot of more interesting stories, but that was my first big one. So that's the one you always remember, isn't it? And that was award-winning. It was that was a multi-award-winning story, because it changed the whole ethos of people working with dangerous materials. So I like to think I helped a little bit, but that was a Nobel Institute kind of a thing.
Oh wow. Yeah, you got to remember those kind of stories and everything. I remember one of the stories that I remember to some degree is when I was working, and it was my only daily newspaper at the Boca Raton News. They had us go cover a house that had an unusual visitor, because the house was near the ocean, and somehow a manatee had gotten stuck in the house. So that was a unique story, because you're going there and the manatee was literally stuck in the, I won't say it was stuck like in the back porch area, but it was definitely there. And I remember even looking at that manatee going like, oh, this is going to be interesting. How y'all going to get this out of this house? Because this does not look like a lightweight thing to be trying to move and everything. So I definitely remember that story. And I also remember that there was a person that was, I won't say it was a young lady, and I'm not even sure what happened to the person, but they were fighting cancer, and they were doing like those hair drives and everything. So I remember covering one where it was like, I think a barbershop that was covering some things in that regards. And I also remember covering some musician and artist friends of mine as well.
Fabulous. Yes. And your interest in music is very Catholic with a small c. It's very expansive and diverse, isn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely. My parents started a radio station when I was in my very young ages. I think I was in my preteen, so I probably was like around 14 or maybe 76. 14 is when I was. They got the station off the ground. It was off of the ground for about 10 years, but they actually were into jazz. They were into social activism and things of that nature. And they didn't feel that there was enough of a voice in either of those regards, because I don't think we had enough jazz stations, particularly straight ahead jazz. And so they literally, with no radio background whatsoever, created the radio station, because my dad was trained as I want to say a civil engineer or one of those other kind of engineering fields, but not radio engineering. And mom's original job was as a guidance counselor, but they definitely were involved in civil rights and other things. And they were like, hey, we need to start our own radio station. So they got together with some friends, applied for the license. It took a while for them to get the license, and then the station stayed on roughly about 11 or 12 years that it was on the air. But that definitely raised a little bit of my awareness of music, because we had all kinds of shows. We had a children's program, Tickle Me Think, that one of my mom's friends, who's still around, Jerry Ann King, helped produce that, if I remember correctly, or maybe that was Betty Mosley. And then we
Mhm.
also had a show that was similar to Zoom. If you remember the old Zoom show, we had a show called Let's Rap. So it was a show by kids for kids, and it was in the early day of rap music. So it was all revolving around the early rap musicians. So I got to learn a lot about those people like the Sugar Hill Gang and some of the other early groups that were in that time frame. So I definitely got to learn about them. And then I had friends that were into blues, which is how I developed that interest in my parents being into jazz, and some others doing the more traditional old school R&B. And then I started doing festivals. And when I started doing festivals, I learned about music that I didn't even think I would have an interest in. But as I listened to the music, I was like, hey, this polka isn't too bad, or this Irish music isn't too bad. So I learned about different other styles of music, even Scottish Highland music, because I would see them come and perform. And sometimes I would find the similarity to music that I already knew, or I would find something unique about it and definitely develop an affinity for it. So you are correct. I have a wide musical taste. Ironically, though, as a friend of mine has pointed out several times, because they tried to quiz me on it, sometimes those of us in the radio and in music aren't always the greatest at knowing our sense of the lyrics. So like I said, we might know the beat, we might know parts of the music, but we don't always know the lyrics. So that being said, we are not that great at name that tune. So I have people like they will put the music out there, they'll say the song, or they'll play a little bit of the riff, and then they'll be like, name that tune. And I'm sitting there going like, I don't know it. And sometimes it's something very simple like Brick House or one of Prince's songs. But while I love the music, I haven't necessarily gotten entrenched enough to be able to win and name that tune, unfortunately. So I do have some friends that tease me about that. They're like, you're in radio and you do this music, you're supposed to know this. I'm like, doesn't always work that way.
Absolutely. My mother in particular brought me up dancing in the living room floor to Sonny and Terry and all these blues, jazz, and Glenn Miller. And so it's the music, and she did teach me, don't move to the music.
Yeah.
You really need to feel it and try and fit. And she couldn't explain it in words. She just had to do it in dancing. And one Saturday night we were dancing away, and I just got it. I felt it, and ever since then, whenever I've been in the company, I worked in the Bahamas as a sports editor for a while, and my favorite compliment from any Bahamian was, "Girl, you got black blood in you," because I could feel it, and now I have this whole new world of discovery, because I'm now getting into hearing the lyrics and going, oh, that's what that means. It was all about the beat and that feel, and just the groove that I discovered first, and it was my mother that taught me that. I don't know how she did it. She just, all of a sudden, it was like sinking into a lovely big deep bath, lovely hot water right up to your neck. It just went, ooh, and I've had it ever since. One of the greatest gifts that my mother gave me.
I can definitely relate to that, and I can also relate to that whole concept of definitely being involved with Sonny Terry's music, because Sonny Terry was actually from this area. Sonny Terry and Brownie McGhee both were out of the Durham area, so this is an area that they actually have at least one marker, if not a couple, dedicated to them, because this is part of their area where they were from and all of that. So definitely it's something that a lot of people can relate to and can definitely find it to be very wonderful in that sense as well. So definitely glad to say that I can say that that's part of our home area and home roots, is having that connection to them. I'm going to bring up one other guest, and I think Vessie's going to come back at some point. I think she said at 6:30, but I was going to bring in another person that I've been looking forward to having. How are you doing, Michelle Dickinson? I'd love for you to share a little bit about your story. I know that you've been involved in podcasting, business, and a number of other things. So if you can just share a little bit about your background. And we've been having a whole conversation. Earlier was around education, because I had my friends from the Augustine Project, which is a local group here that is doing some amazing work in the field of tutoring. And then I've had Nola as well as Vessie was on earlier, and IPC had recruited me, so we're all members of the Funky Puppets, and we had our puppet performance on Clubhouse earlier today as well. And then I had Dr. Wayne Brown, who is teaching both English and business over there in Japan. He moved from California and decided that he wanted to be an expatriate. So he's just to come back home, but his major place of residence is over there in Japan. So he's definitely made home there and all of that. So I'd love for you to share with our audience a little bit about yourself as well.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here with you. I appreciate the invitation. So I guess the reason why you wanted me on was to talk a little bit about mental health, and that it's like such an integrated part of my life. I grew up with a mother who had bipolar disorder, and I cared for her for a large part of my life. And then I also suffered from depression myself, and spent, oh my goodness, probably 19 years in a corporate job until I realized that something bigger was for me to be focusing on. And that was creating more understanding around mental health and more compassion for mental health. So in the beginning of, actually at the end of 19, in the beginning of the pandemic, I started my company. And what I do is I work with organizations to recenter their employees and really breed cultures of compassion for people with invisible disabilities. I really want people to understand that just because you have a mental illness doesn't mean that you're any less of a person. And we need to extend ourselves to people who might be suffering, because that could be the barrier that has them get care. So that's just a little bit about me. I gave a TED Talk, I wrote a memoir about it, and here I am.
Well, one of the things that you were talking to, I was curious about is how do you think corporate America is doing in terms of dealing with this whole concept of mental health? Because I'm thinking that even in the middle of this pandemic, we're seeing a lot of people that are maybe more compassionate, but at the same time, they might be a little bit not doing as much as they could be doing in that space. And I know that a lot of times there's even questions, and you just alluded to it, as to whether we're even reaching out to people that might be autistic or might be bipolar if they're in that work environment. I actually have an IPC who's the founder of the Funky Puppets. I think I had mentioned that to him one time, as well as others and everything. I've actually have what is called dysgraphia, which is a form of dyslexia and things of that nature. So I definitely sometimes have to be aware of that and know what it causes in relationship to a number of things that go on in my life, including that's part of the reason that I don't drive. But that's there are other factors that might be involved in that as well. But I was just wondering your thoughts about how we as a society are doing in terms of dealing with mental health.
Yeah, I feel like we've come so far. We have these wonderful outspoken artists and athletes talking about it. I think the one thing that the silver lining of COVID is that more people have been affected by a mental illness who may have never been. And those could be the very leaders and organizations would finally get it and maybe do more. So I'm hopeful. I do believe that this experience of the pandemic has forced us all to look at it, because it's not normal for us to be quarantined. We are human beings. We're connected. We are, we're designed to connect with others. But when you look at the data, it says it's like 42% of the global workforce has experienced a decline in their well-being, their mental health since the start of the pandemic. So the prevalence is definitely there. What I think organizations do is they do what they know they should do, which is benefits and employee assistance programs. But the barrier to accessing those is still very real. If you have a stigma in your workplace, or the majority of employees are ashamed to reach out for support, they're fearful their boss is going to find out. So we still have that barrier to access care, that we can do a better job. And so I'm hopeful with more people being affected by it or seeing a loved one suffer, that there's going to be improvements in helping employees access care.
Because one of the things I'm curious to know, and I know Nola's got Gary to leave very shortly, so I'm going to toss a question to her very shortly. But before I get to that and everything, one of the things that I've been curious about is sometimes when you have people that are in different parts of the mental health spectrum and they're in your work environment, too often I find that people don't know what to do with them, even in the work environment. I know that I have a very good coworker that actually had was either had Asperger or autism. I forget which one, but it was the one that you usually are very good at naming figures and having those kind of like memories, kind of that Rain Man kind of syndrome. Because I know he was a very much a masterful with minor league statistics. Sometimes folks would be like wondering why he needed to know all those statistics and everything along those lines. But then they would be engaging in those conversations with him. But then sometimes they were also feeling that he might have been having space issues. So they might also tell him that he was getting a little bit too close and things of that nature. So I'm just wondering, as one that is involved in those spaces, what kind of advice would you give to people if they have somebody that is facing those kind of challenges in the workplace? Because I don't think it's just in employees, but oftentimes it's also your coworkers that you're working with as well.
Absolutely. And I think, we underestimate the power of just extending ourselves and listening. A lot of times it's uncomfortable for us. So we look away and we make the assumption that someone else will take care of it or someone else will reach out to them. And what I tell people all the time is just extend yourself and extend your heart and listen. You don't have to fix it. You might be able to just help them know where to go. Like you can go to your website for your company and remind them of what's available, but you don't have to fix it. I think listening to someone with what they're dealing with is one of the most beautiful gifts as human beings we can give to one another.
No, I definitely agree with you, and I'm definitely going to continue the conversation with you and everything. I know Nola said she had to leave shortly, so before I continue the conversation with you, one of the things I've been doing with all my guests is giving them the opportunity to share their message of peace, their message of hope, and how folks can reach them via social media. So I'll toss that to you, Nola, and then I'll continue the conversation with Michelle, and hopefully Vessi will pop back in to give us that musical interlude before I wrap the show totally up and everything. But Nola, if you want to share your ways that folks can reach you and any message of peace and hope that you would like to share.
Well, I would, but I'd also like to share a story about my own part of the spectrum, which I didn't realize actually. We're all on the spectrum. My husband is a civil servant who's very computer literate and very wonderful. It's great when I ask him what, if that costs that and the mortgage interest rate is that much as a month, comes up with it like that. So it's great. But another thing he does is he doesn't do this. He doesn't actually go and count things. But whenever he goes into a room, automatically the number of tiles on the wall will come to him, right? And he just counts everything, but he's not actually counting them. But that's fine. And I've always said, I really love, your autism kind of thing. I don't know what to call it. Because you can do this, you do that, things come to your head immediately. And of course he doesn't like that label, right? He's not. He's just good with figures, right? So, but I mean, I'm even there on the scale somewhere, because every time I hear someone's surname, I have to translate it. I don't know why. Kaufman, if I say Mr. Kaufman, I don't know why most of them are German actually. So that's businessman. Koenig, if somebody's called Koenig, I immediately know that's a king. And every time I hear about Mark Zuckerberg, Sugar Mountain, can't take him seriously. But so I'm sorry for that. But my mantra, yes, is that, especially as a print journalist, the impact of words lies more in, less in what is said than how it's heard. And that's what I love about audio platforms now, because you can nuance it, you can give a little bit more of the intent of what you're saying than you can with print. And you just have to think about the number of Facebook posts you've made or the number of emails that you sent where you've immediately got a really reactive response. You go, oh my God, I didn't mean it that way, but it was heard that way, because it's difficult to do that with print and the written word. Yes, audio and the work that you're doing, the stations that you're doing, getting people's message out, it is definitely, I think, it is the winner, and it's really going to win over print eventually, I think, which is a shame because print was my life. But yeah, that's it. Oh yeah, so me. So now I'm moving into to voiceover. Anyone who wants to reach out to me, to audition for them. They can say I'm rotten if they like. I go under Noella Norton or Voice Over Glasgow. So Pinterest and Twitter is Voice Over Glasgow, and I love to. I have a clubhouse club called Monetize Your Voice, because I love to encourage people to try to get on the first rung of using their voice to sustain them financially in some way, even as a hobby. I love to get, because so many people say, "Oh, you can't do it; it's difficult. Acting's a difficult word to get into. You're never going to make money at that." Well, yeah, you can. As I said, cashier number 4, please. Somebody gets paid to say that. So that's my club. My other giving back. I don't want to take up too much of your time, Michelle. Sorry. My other giving back is I run a clubhouse room, which is called Do the Right Thing. WRITE thing, because I believe that, oh my goodness, how many times have you heard your stories from your mum and your dad and your grandparents and your uncles who were activists here, and you all of a sudden you rediscover your grandfather. You go, I didn't know you did that in the war. So I'd like to encourage people to write their own story, write the book of your life, not necessarily for publication, but to leave as a legacy for your grandkids and your great grandkids, who you're not going to ever meet, but they'll meet you, and they'll know themselves through your story and your experience and your wisdom, if you would only start writing it. I can do the how, but I really want you to do the do. Do the right thing, get it down there. Even if you start, and you don't have to start at the beginning, start somewhere in the middle and work out from there. So that's my 2 clubhouse. That's my 2 things that I really want to do, and just to encourage people to talk and write.
I appreciate it, definitely, and everything. Definitely appreciate it. Appreciate you being on and definitely sharing your wisdom and everything. Michelle, she actually brings up an interesting point, and I was wondering your thoughts about this, because I've heard a lot of people talk about social media and the positive aspects. I actually met Nola as well, as became a part of the Funky Eye Puppets through Clubhouse and things of that nature. Ironically, I already knew IPC because he had come to a cultural arts center that I work at many years ago, but we reconnected through that app. We've heard the positive things, but we've also heard the negative aspects of social media as well. So as one that is an advocate about trying to help people in mental health, can you talk about that aspect and maybe the good and the bad that you have found and how you cope with it? Oh, you're on mute.
It's like everything else in life, right? Moderation. Right? We're our own worst enemy when we don't have discipline or monitor how much we're consuming. I think platforms like Clubhouse helped me through this pandemic like you wouldn't imagine, because I'm alone and I'm single and I have my dogs that don't speak. Clubhouse was a godsend. I was connecting, I was talking to people. It was beautiful. But you also have to manage, like you think about Instagram, you think about Facebook, and all the information coming at you. And there's only so much of it we can really absorb. The good, the bad, the comparison, the subliminal messaging, we do this thing called comparing, even though we don't want to admit it. There is a comparison going on. So I am a big advocate for moderation, but I'm also an advocate for doing a detox, doing a technology detox and stepping away, like removing it from your phone. If you're feeling like you're just not doing great, like remove the apps from your phone and see how that goes for you for a week, and maybe access Facebook from your computer for like a half an hour at lunchtime. I don't know, but put those parameters in place. And I think the biggest thing we can do is, how are we feeling before we get into a social media app, and then assessing how are we feeling when we're logging out. Yeah. Do we feel any better, or do we feel worse? And listen to that and say, yeah, maybe I need to spend less time here, or maybe I do need a digital detox.
Yeah, that makes sense. That digital detox can be important. I've had friends of mine that have taken a day off. I do know that sometimes I'll stay on Clubhouse and some of the other apps, and I look at the clock and I'm like, good grief, it's 4 o'clock. I'm supposed to be up at 8 or 9 o'clock. So then you're like, got the shortage of sleep, which they also recommend as well as something that we need. So it can definitely wrap you up in that regards also, because sometimes it can push you into not getting enough sleep. And we've also heard about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, Michelle, as well, about how it has impacted some of our young people. Like I know that even in the African American community, there's been talk that some people have been pushed more toward, or I shouldn't say push, but have been thinking more about like even suicidal thoughts because of some of the things that they're either hearing or because of some of the bullying that's going on against them. And I was using the African American women as an example. I could also use women of a certain weight or a certain style that might also get bullied as well, because there is body shaming that goes on in those apps as well. And in addition to some of the things that might be happening in terms of racism and other kinds of things, sexism, and even identity politics with the way that some of our people in the LGBT community are treated as well. So I'm just wondering your thoughts about that as a something that we also need to be careful about and even maybe monitor it. I don't want to say that we need to take off that kind of stuff, because I do believe in free speech, but there's got to be ways to monitor it. And I would love to hear your thoughts about that, because I mean, your mom was involved in that space to some degree, being in that bipolar space.
Oh, totally. But we're never going to be able to control what's out there.
Right.
We're never going to be able to censor it enough, change it enough. The only thing we have control over is our peace, our inner peace, and ourselves. And I say that because, at the end of the day, one of the reasons we go onto these platforms is we do like the likes. Right? Am I going to get a like for this? Am I going to get attention for this? Am I going to get a follow for this?
Right.
And we're constantly reaching out there for validation and out there for fulfillment and out there to be heard and seen. And it's like, you don't realize how much wisdom you have within yourself. And if you just turn inward, if you do some prayer, if you do some meditation, turn inward, it's amazing how fulfilling that can be. And that's, I'm a big advocate for teaching people a simple 3-minute meditation and then reflect on how you feel after that. Because we live in a society where we're looking for outside, external, instead of inward peace.
Yeah, exactly. I can agree with that. The other thing that I was curious about, and I've actually had this experience, some people would say that was probably a mistake on my part, but there's a saying that goes on, and it comes back to your mom and everything that goes on in relationships and things along those lines. And I know that there have been at least once, if not twice, because the people told me, so I'm not like speaking out of school and everything, that I went into relationships because I'm still single, even at the age of 59 and everything. So I went into relationships, and during the course of the relationship, I found out that the person I was in the relationship with was bipolar or had some other kind of things along those lines and everything. I sometimes wish that they had told me that earlier, because I know that sometimes they're supposed to say, leave the baggage at the door, but you don't always do that. And sometimes you don't want to do it because you don't want to ruin that opportunity. So I was just wondering, and your thoughts about that as one that is a parent of somebody that is bipolar, and it probably even impacted the way that you were raised, and maybe even the way your own single life as well. So I was just wondering your thoughts around those, because I know that there are a couple of relationships that I went into, and like I said, I have a great deal of respect for both of these people that I'm thinking about and everything. I just knew that we weren't meant for each other after I learned some other factors about their relationship and also myself as well. So I'm not going to just leave it on one party either.
Yeah. No, that's very wise of you. I guess I think about I think about the fact that I know so many people with a diagnosis of depression or bipolar who are successfully navigating their lives and actually thriving. So to have it be that, like, you need to tell me if you have a mental illness, I think that's important. But I also think it's like, how much control are you taking on around that? And they might be perfectly fine. I have plenty of friends who are thriving. They have challenges, but to look at them, you would never know that they were struggling, because they get the proper care they need. So it's if we live in a society that's mental illness is so stigmatized that to say that up front, it might have had you run and never even get to know the beautiful people that they were, even though they weren't a fit, right?
Right, exactly.
So yeah, so I'm a fan of everyone is unique and everyone has the ability to manage the best of their ability if they take that on.
Yeah, because one of the things that I love, and I've referenced it a couple times just because they were a guest on the show today, and also because we just did a performance earlier today, the first ever Clubhouse performance of a audio puppet show that we're aware of and everything. But that's one of the things that I love about the Funky Eye Puppets is that they actually are about inclusion. So there are people on there that I know have different kinds of disabilities. I know there's at least one that's blind. There's somebody that's fighting AIDS. There's somebody that's fighting MDS. I think there might even be somebody that's deaf on there as well. And I'm sure that there's some people that have various mental aspects of what's going on in whatever they may be within the spectrum. And I think that that's something that they did intentionally, was to have some members of the troupe that were a separate, not separate, but a subset of the troupe, which is a part of the troupe that is very inclusive. And I think that that's something that more people need to do, is make sure that they even have that in their workplace or their environment, this nature of inclusion. So I was just wondering your thoughts about inclusion and how important that is in whatever aspects of your life are out there and everything. And by the way, hello, Mr. Dog, because I saw the dog walk by here.
Mark, I have 3. That's one of them. No, I think, when you think about inclusion, nowadays, you also have to be thinking about the things that you can't see that make people different,
Right.
know? And so to your point, people come to the table with all abilities and with all different, that's what makes us beautiful, right? We come with different experiences. We come with different backgrounds, different ethnicities. And that's what makes experiences richer.
Right.
And it's the same. When I work with organizations talking about workplace inclusion, it's inclusion of people of all abilities, including, if they're struggling with, like you mentioned, like Asperger's or some type of thing you can't see, but that you need to accommodate them. Like, what are the special accommodations we can give them? But it takes something, because you can't see it, and they're going to have to talk about it. They're going to have to share that. And so what environment is there for them? And are we really being inclusive and accepting of them? Just like we would anyone else who comes with their own, experiences and the way they look, the way they act. It's a beautiful thing, diversity.
No, diversity is very beautiful. And one of the things that I say all the time is that I sometimes feel that, and this might just be my own philosophy, I don't know, one, that I personally think that we all have some sort of different ability, because I don't even like the word disability or handicap, but I think we all have some sort of different ability, no matter what it is. Maybe that it's that your sight might be a little bit better, or your hearing might be a little bit worse, or whatever, or maybe it's just the way that you speak. But I all think that we, from a person of the many billions of people we have in the world, all have a different ability across the board. I don't think that that's saying that there are no two people alike is very much common. Like, I don't think there's another person that is like Michelle. I know that there's not another Mark. There may be people that look like us, but they're not another personality. Even if they look like us, they probably have totally different personalities from us and all of that. So that's one of the things that I say. And then coming back to your mom's diagnosis, I also, because I actually wrote a short play about this, it was actually the subline you'll enjoy when I describe it. But I'm also of the opinion that most of us are have a level of insanity. None of us are totally sane. I don't think that there is any such thing as a totally sane person. I have jokingly said that if I run across a totally sane person, I'm running it in the other direction, because I'm totally scared if they're telling me that they're totally sane. The short story that I wrote, and this was way back in my college ages, was a story of a person going to a mental hospital. They were analyzing themselves at the mental hospital, or they were going through like a session with their psychiatrist. And in the session, they were talking about all the craziness of the world. So they were pointing out pollution. They were pointing out climate change. They were pointing out all of these different other things. And the basic conclusion of the short story or play or whatever I wrote it as, was that maybe those were the people that were really insane and not the person that were in the insane house. Because I think at the end, that was kind of the conclusion, was that the person went off to have dinner with Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, and whoever other the people might have been there in whatever that space is in the mental hospital. But the real insanity was what was going on in Washington, and at that time it was the 80s. But we could use the 21st century and still say it's the same thing.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
that was the whole notion, was that it might have been more insanity going on in those people that are supposed to be the same ones running the world. So I think that you would probably agree with that also, because that was just kind of the notion of what the story was. Now, another thing, and I'm not one of them elephant in the room kind of things, but sometimes you hear the thought, and I was just wondering if this is a fear of yours, and I don't know whether you have to deal with this either with your therapist, if you have one, and I know some people are even terrified of going to therapy based on cultures and things of that nature. But the thing that you oftentimes hear about people that are the kids of bipolar is that there is a fear that they will go down that track themselves. So I was wondering if that was a concern of yours, and if you ever had to address that, or how that came about. Because I do know that even if you study like famous cases in the criminal situation, that you would find out that there were people that were the sons of people that were in that situation. Just like you find out that not all the time, but sometimes abusers go on to become abusers. I'm not saying all the time that it's the case, but it is a fear out there. So just one, as one in that space, is that something that you have had to deal with, even coping with? And I hope I'm not putting my foot in my mouth and asking too difficult of questions.
No, not at all. I'm an open book, quite honestly. I was adopted. So the one thing that I always said to myself was, well, thank goodness I'm adopted. I'm not going to have to deal with this. Right. And then ironically, I don't know how many years ago, I was going through a divorce, a life event. I'd never been diagnosed with a mental illness before. And I was diagnosed with depression. And it just reminded me that nobody is immune to a mental illness, even though you would think that it's, you know, it's hereditary or whatever. But life events, extreme loss, major challenging experiences in our lives can take us down. And that's what happened. And because I had a healthy relationship to therapy, because my mom had always been in and out of therapy, I knew something wasn't right. And I reached out and I got support. And my doctor was like, yeah, you're dealing with depression, and you're going to have to figure out how to navigate it. Because I remember asking him for medication, and he was like, no. He was like, I want you to find healthy ways to navigate this, because otherwise, he's like, I don't want to numb you to this, because you have to experience this and navigate it. And that's what I did. I threw myself into running. I surrounded myself with my friends when I was low, and I was able to navigate it and come out okay. But I never, ever, I mean, like, I dealt a little bit with seasonal depression living here in the Northeast. In the winter, it gets really like gray and depressing, but like, I never dealt with a diagnosis until that.
How important do you think it is for people to get into therapy? Because I know there are entire segments of the population that, if you mention the word therapy, they run in the opposite direction. And part of that is because of the history of therapy in certain communities. And yes, African-American community is one of them, but there are other communities as well that have had some bad histories with therapy, and just in the way that it was diagnosed and used as a tool of suppression and oppression. So I just wondering, when you're talking to people about it, how do you get past those stigmas? Because it does exist. I'm not going to lie.
Pray about it. I mean, how many communities believe you pray about it? That's how you deal with it. I'm a fan of pray about it and get some help. You know, I think it has a lot to do with fear, right? And having bad experiences, like you said. I mean, let's think about it. If you're shopping for anything, and you don't like the first salesperson you go to, aren't you going to go to the next one? And aren't you going to go to the next one? Aren't you going to the next one? Right. It's the same thing with therapy. Find that one therapist that fits for you, that works for you. Have no shame in saying, I did not vibe with you. I'm going to continue looking for the right fit. You know, like, there are apps out there now, like My Wellbeing is a great one, where they match you with someone who maybe looks like you, who gets you, you know, someone who you will vibe with, not someone who's completely removed from who you are and what you grew up with. So I tell people, do not give up, do not quit. You need to, if you feel like you need to be in therapy, don't quit. Find the right fit. And then when people have trepidation around reaching out for formal therapy, I say, let's start with a trusted friend. Find a trusted friend and just talk to a trusted friend. That's the first step, because the biggest mistake we make is we keep it all inside, and then we ruminate about it and we ruminate about it, and we make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Versus if you have someone you love and trust and you just say, hey, like, let's just have a chat, talk to them, because you just verbalizing it to them is the first step. And it could lead you to be like, okay, well, if I could talk to you, maybe I could talk to someone else, someone like a professional.
You just brought up two interesting questions that I'm curious to hear your answers about, because I'm liking this idea of talking to people. But then I have seen two things that have happened, and it's happened even sometimes in my life, but I've also seen it happen with friends. It's the concept of, yes, it's good to talk about it, but then, as you mentioned, sometimes people, and I know I'm guilty of it, will internalize until the busting point or whatever, and then you have that busting moment, whatever. But the other thing that happens sometimes is that people are I guess the word is apprehensive about therapy, that I sometimes wonder if they don't do what I call like a brain dump. So they kind of like do that free flowing brain dump. And can't that be the opposite problem? Like where you're doing too much of your angst on whatever you're going into and too much of that history into whatever the relationship is, whatever that new relationship is. Because I have seen that happen too, where you're sitting there going like, yes, I need to know this kind of stuff in order to bond with you as a friend or bond with you as a relationship or whatever this situation is. But at the same time, do I need to have this kind of like total angst put out and everything?
Yeah. So I have a friend of mine who would say to me, you know, we all have those friends who need to just dump. Just let me tell you what I'm dealing with. And I think it's fine. We should listen to people. We should listen to those we love. But if the same thing happens 3 days later and they haven't taken a new or different action, then shame on you. Shame on you for saying, okay, I've heard, we've had this conversation. Now what action are you going to take? Because then at that point it just becomes that they're just like abusing you, because then they're just going to unload on you again and again and again and again. And the onus is on them to take a new or different action than just continuously dumping on you.
No, I definitely agree with you on that and everything. I just wanted to bring on really quickly. She just moved, so I'll get ready to bring her on very shortly so she gets back to sleep. Nope, now she's back to sitting down. It's a great thing about the power of the internet. We're going to have some song right now, too, because song is very important to things going on in our world. How are you doing, Bessie? Glad to have you come on.
Hi, Mark. Thank you. Hi, Michelle. Glad to be back.
Glad that you're back. Actually, we've had different guests, and Michelle, and you can actually relate to what Michelle was talking about, because we were talking about mental health and the importance of mental health. And I know that you had some space in that as well. And I know that that's part of the reason of your even wanting to be involved with the Funky Eye Puppets was because of some of your own experiences in that regard as well. So definitely glad to see all the lovely instruments of yours behind us and everything. And if you want to share a little bit about what you've got going on, I'm sure Michelle would love to hear that as well.
Nice to meet you, Michelle. Thank you, Mark. Good to see you, because it's only ever been audio on Clubhouse, right?
Yep, exactly.
So this is really wonderful. And thank you for earlier. I don't know, the reception dropped, but I guess it was a blessing in disguise. What I wanted to tell you was that I have a song about not feeling mentally well, that where I felt everything was just one thing after the other caving in, and I had to write a song. And I'd like to play it for you. Please. So with regards to mental...
Said, please do.
Oh, right now? Okay.
Well, if you want to give explanation, you can do that first.
Well, that would be like a brain dump right now. You know, I don't know if I want to... No, I've got a good therapist. Thank you. Yeah, who doesn't need a song and who doesn't have issues? Like, this is the world we live in, right? It's so important. Mental health is so important. I just lost a dear friend of mine from the Aria Nova Rhythm Collective, from ARC, who championed me for many years. A very dear friend of mine, Chris Anthony Wozniak. And I've been going through grief and, you know, there was 4 days of crying, and then there was just like, are we in the twilight zone? Like, time is standing still. What's happening? One of my closest music partners and dear friend, like a brother to me, suddenly not here anymore. But now I realize how much it mattered that he got his music out there. And I think for mental health, because he for 4 years was just like pushing it, like producer, like sing this, do this, let's release this, let's file share, let's get the song out there, let's build our team. And so he championed me and prepared me really for the Funky Eye Puppets and everything else, all my musical collaborations going on right now. So with that said, yeah, here's the song. Does this sound okay?
Yep.
The truth is, I'm not feeling. Here we go. One more time. 1, 2, 3, go. The truth is, I'm not feeling well. I need to talk to someone about my health. Things ain't always how they ought to be. I got me. You know, I haven't done this song in so long. That's not how it goes. So let me do another one. I will send you a recording of how that song's supposed to go, because I'm not even going to try and write that song right now, because I already did that 4 years ago and it came out in a fail swoop. Mental health. Let's talk about art. Here we go. This is called Social. Human beings are social. We're just no good on our own. Human beings are social, not meant to be left alone. Oh, hold me tonight. Hold me close to your heart. I'll console you tonight. And in the morning we'll start. So if you want to wake up and shine, that'd be fine with me, that'd be just fine. 'Cause all you got is this moment anyway. No guarantee that we're gonna be here another day. All living beings are social. We're just no good on our own. Human beings are social, not meant to be left alone for too long anyhow. It's just a matter of time before we all leave here, our green earth divine. If you want to wake up and shine, that'd be fine with me, that'd be just fine. 'Cause all we got is this moment anyway. Did you get the God is this moment? No need to take it away. Just give yourself a love and give it every day. Grateful for the love that you breathe and pray. Then I know I'm not alone when I can call you without the phone. I'll turn my love light on, my Lord. Oh, so many ways to get back home. There's so many ways to get back home. There's so many ways to get back home. We light a candle in your name. Oh, oh, for the world is never gonna be the same. Gonna miss you, boy.
it means I love you. Eu te amo, no one above you. And human beings are social, we're just no good on our own. Do-do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do. Are you stuck in a dream world where no one can hear you? No one is listening 'cause they are lost too. Then suddenly someone shows up from nowhere. They are the ones who will bring you back home. Are you off in the distance, searching for nothing, thinking it's something you need to have? Are you waiting for someone to recognize your love? You are the one that has to bring yourself back. Even if it takes all of your life, even if you think that it's not worth a try, even if somehow you don't know you're alive, even if you're not sure you're divine. Are you stuck in a dream world where no one can feel you? Everyone's numb from the hatred in the world. Somebody brushes your shoulder as they walk by. You are the one that has to bring yourself back. Love is the way to bring yourself back home. Even if it takes all of your life, even if you think that it's not worth a try, even if somehow you don't know you're alive, you're alive, you're alive, you're alive, you're alive, you're alive, you're alive. You're divine, you're divine, you're on time, you're on time. Hey, yeah. Da 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 da. You guys will sing this with me, guys. Ready? Here we go. Ready? Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Are you stuck in a dream world where no one can?
Hey, I
End it
enjoyed
there
it.
because maybe we're not stuck in the dream world because we're here. Yay!
We're here, and
Thank
that's like in the
you.
dream world. I appreciate that. By the way, you just got a great compliment because one of the shows that I do, that I produce, not one that I host, is one by Sean Coco McMillan. You will probably wonder who the heck is Sean Coco McMillan. She is the former background vocalist for Gerald Levert and has a group called In Front, and she also is the co-owner of a club in Casablanca, Morocco. So definitely, she was saying
Wow.
she was enjoying your voice
Thank you.
and definitely
Thank
enjoying
you,
what you
Coco.
got going.
How cool.
Yeah. Hey, Michelle, how important do you think it is for art? Because that's part of what the Funky Eye Puppets was about and the performance we did earlier, as well as just in general. But how important do you think art is both to education and to our mental health? So as one that is a mental health advocate, I'd love to hear your thoughts about the importance of art.
Oh my gosh, it's so important. Like, how many people could relate to the words that Bessie was just singing? I mean, I could. I mean, you know, we have such a horrible stigma that prevents relatedness. And I think through music and through art, all kinds of it can actually reach those who are so reluctant to connect and talk about how they're feeling. I think it's huge. I'm a potter. I love, you know, designing and creating with my hands. It's my expression. And I think it creates a bridge and relatedness that we definitely need to eradicate stigma.
Yeah, go ahead. What you got to say,
Michelle.
Bessie?
Oh, I was going to just interrupt, but I have a new thing. I think I want to just raise my hand. I'm always interrupting. I think I just learned finally just to go like this. On Clubhouse, Mark, it's not that easy. You have to like, Michelle, I don't know if you've been on Clubhouse. You have to be on Clubhouse, but you have to like click your mic.
Yes.
And I was gonna, you're a potter?
Mm-hmm.
So my mother started a gallery called Woman Made Gallery in 1992 as a senior thesis project. After having 5 kids, and the gallery is called Woman Made, and womanmade.org supports women in the arts and has been championing women's art and equaling the playing field. And she's actually up for the award with the United States Caucus for the Arts. She's getting an award this year, Woman of the Year, for being the founder. She's the co-founder with Kelly Henson, and they went to Northeastern. But if you go to womanmade.org, spelled as it is, Woman Made, WOMANMADE.org, you can learn more about it because you're an artist. And so they've got a beautiful online platform and gallery, and they do the International Open every year, and they're just a wonderful NFP. And it's not, you know, and it's representing those marginalized, you know. And so the Creature Club that we're in, we call it the Creature Club, right, Mark? Yes. I should call you Echo on this call, and you should call me Vibrato.
Yes,
Vibrato. Those are our characters. Yes. So the Creature Club, because we've got people on in the troupe that are gunshot victims and you know, that have MS, that have slowly going blind, and you know, these amazing artists that, you know, are in the marginalized sector of just, I think, consciousness. Probably not so much in other countries, I would imagine, but I'm not sure about that. But I think the United States specifically would be a great platform for all having to do with including and understanding and not getting offended. You know, that I think people have a problem with getting in mental health. I think we take everything so personally, you know, like, you know, like that's, I think those discussions are hard to have. Like you mentioned, like what, you know, what is it that's going to actually bridge the divide and be the like network of understanding that like collectively, globally we need. And I think with people that are marginalized, that to have something like the Funky Eye Puppets that represents them, and it's audio and you hear it. Were you there for our show today, Michelle? Did you get a chance?
No.
Well,
we'll have to send her an audio tape.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're gonna love it. It went so well. Our director, IPC, you know, his parents were in the internment camps, and he came here as a baby, and his mother was a Shigen poet of the royal court in Japan, and he has such a wild, beautiful story. He worked with Lucasfilms, and these creatures that he created. His father died of cancer when he was 10, and he just lost his mother last year. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because his whole world, like a discussion we had about 3 weeks ago, he held up paintbrushes because we had it like a Zoom call or something like that, a Facebook call. And he's like, these paintbrushes, I wouldn't have them here because if my father was here, I wouldn't have followed the arts like I did. You know, which is interesting because I want to know his father, you know? And so you should, are you going to interview IPC, Mark?
I've interviewed IPC. I've interviewed him twice now. So yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So where was I? Was this before we met?
I think it was before we met. Yes.
Okay.
But I've got those on, actually, because he talks a lot about art and activism. So I've actually got both of those copies available. So I'll actually have to send them out, put them on the Discord if he doesn't mind that and everything. So I'll get it.
I'd love to share them too, because I know a lot of people would really benefit from hearing that. And thank you. I'm talking too much now. I think
you're perfectly good. I'm glad to have the conversation and everything. Actually, Michelle, she raised a very interesting point, which is, a lot of times we hear about social media being a advocate or a positive aspect of mental health, but we also know it can be a negative aspect of mental health. So I was wondering your thoughts about that and how, you mentioned the detoxing, but also the ways that we can detox, and also maybe even detox while we're within, because some of the ways you were mentioning, we're turning it off, which I agree you do need to turn it off, but how can you detox even when you're within? Because sometimes you have to detox even while you're within, because you can't always turn it off, because sometimes it's part of your work environment.
I think it's a matter of choosing, right? Like, I love Clubhouse. I think Clubhouse is more authentic when it comes to connections because you're listening to a voice. You can't really, what you do on Instagram is a little bit different than you really have to show up in Clubhouse. So I think it's choosing where you engage to have those engagements be real versus superficial scrolling through, looking at a curated reflection of reality. So I think it's that. I mean, I go back to having boundaries and making sure that you're doing other things that are good for you too, and so that it's not the phone isn't the only thing consuming you every day. Like
I'm guilty. I'm guilty of that lately.
like taking a yoga class, going for a walk, connecting with friends. These are all very good for your mental health. Otherwise, you're just constantly staring at this, and it's just not healthy. So
my wrist was hurting.
Yeah, there you go.
Sending links today for the funky eye puppets.
And tech neck, right? You have the neck
Yes.
issues that we have from like this. So yeah, I think also sleep. We talk about Clubhouse, man. You can be in there all night long. Well, what does that do?
Yeah,
to your
4 or
I
5
mean, you're
o'clock,
not
6 in the
sleeping.
morning, and then you got to get it back up at 8 or 9. I know I've been guilty.
No good. Boundaries.
And sometimes it's not even like there are some rooms that you understand why you're in there, but then there are other times you're going like, do I really need to be
Why am I
hearing
here?
about COVID for the umpteenth time, or do I really need to be
Oh,
playing some of these social games if you're in that single
Yeah.
space and things of that nature? So sometimes you're going like, do I really need to be in those spaces?
Yeah.
I've jumped
Sure.
in a few rooms where I was like, nope, oops.
Wrong room. Don't want to be there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Well-
energy. I talk about energy a lot. Like where you gain energy and where you go that is sucking your energy. You have to be tuned into that. Only you can be tuned into that.
How important do you think energy and empathy is, Michelle? Because I'm actually a big fan of empathy and energy. I'm actually one of those people. I got a good friend that is always getting his crystals from various sources, and
Mhm.
I definitely consider myself to be an empathetic person. So,
Mhm.
how important do you think that is for life in general?
Oh my goodness. I'm a huge fan. One of my closest friends is a Reiki practitioner. Are you kidding? I'm a big believer in, choose your circle of who you spend time with, because it can drain you or pump you up, Empathy. I feel like I'm an empath, so I really need to tune in to who I'm spending time with, because whether or not they're unloading on me, like we talked about earlier, or they're just silent, they can pull my energy from me. So I always do like an inventory. How do I feel after I spend time with people? Because I don't want to repeat that if it's not good.
No, definitely. One of the things I was curious to hear from both of y'all about is I brought it up on this platform, and actually it's one of the questions I asked IPC and everything was, too often there are those folks that are in our circle, and they can even sometimes be our family, that can be the negative impacts as well. So how do you deal with those people that are negative into your circle and in your life, and how do you get them to understand that you might want to listen to their advice, but you're not going to let their negativity pull your dreams down? So I was just wondering, how do you deal with that? So I'll start with you, Betsy. How do you deal with those people that might be negative
That's
about
a
your
big
art?
question, Mark. That's such a huge question. I'm the mother of 4, and I'll start there with my children 12 and under, and the moods that we go through as we're getting to our teenage years with especially my 2 eldest, 11 and 12. Yeah, you have to be compassionate, understanding, just, and rooted in your, firmly in being kind of the balance sequence, if you will. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't times where I get pulled up into the drama triangle. I took a course this year with the Alchemy of Yoga, and Sylvia, she busted out like the diagram, the drama triangle, and it literally, the prosecutor, the victim, and then the savior, and it talks about that. And I just, to literally see this diagram and to know each of those, like the hero, I'm saying, all those 3, that game is a losing game, the drama triangle. So as soon as we recognize, wait, that's such a great tool to have. To one of my kids, I might say, do you really want to be in the drama triangle right now? Being the prosecutor, and I'll explain why. Now, I don't always remember this because, like you said, Michelle, mental health, you have to like check within. You have to like meet all the things to like feel well enough to even be in that space. So now that I'm reminding myself, I'm going to start utilizing it again. I'm going to be really honest. It's very hard to do when you're overdoing things in your life and you don't make time to just chill, meditate, do a mantra. My Kundalini teacher, just to sit down and sit and close your eyes in the morning first thing and kind of check in, like I'm not doing that. I need to be doing that. So the drama triangle helps me, Mark, with that, when I'm remembering to use it. And I'll yield there.
About yourself, Michelle, but by the way, I like that idea because I remember my grandmother when she was living, she used to have, it was right next to the old rotary phone, a wooden doghouse. And in the wooden doghouse was, there were little dogs of myself and all 10 of my other cousins. And if you got in trouble, you went in the doghouse. It was like a little version of mental torture because if you got in trouble, you would go in the doghouse. So like I said, folks knew that you had done something wrong because your name was in the doghouse.
How did it make you feel?
Of course, it made you not feel all that great because you sit there going like, "I'm in the doghouse." Fortunately, I was one of. It's just me and my younger brother. Malik just have a little bit more of a troublesome personality in terms of being the troublemaker, so he spent more time in the doghouse than I did. So I can honestly say that and everything, and he'll even admit that as well. But those times that I got there, it was not a pleasant feeling.
Oh.
Aww.
They're championed in tribes that I've read about where if you're doing something and you're not like doing well, you're not being like, who you are, the world's gotten to you and you're choosing, making bad choices and being kind of not a good person, that they don't like tell you that you're bad. They surround you with love. They tell you how awesome you are and why, because you've obviously forgotten. I think that's the thing to do, right? But tell that to my Bulgarian father and my German mother with their disciplinary actions, which were intense but they were right to be how they were.
No doubt.
They wanted
No, go ahead. They wanted what?
They're passing on what their parents gave them. We all try to do the best we can, each generation, I would imagine. Sorry, I didn't mean to speak before Michelle had a chance. I just wanted to share the tribe, this article that I'd read about that, just to surround the person with love who's behaving badly,
yeah.
I appreciate that, and I agree with that. So what about yourself, Michelle? How have you dealt with those negative people if they were in there and along those lines and everything? And how do you deal with it with your if you have kids of your own, or those 4 dogs, because those 4 dogs may be your kids?
3, and they are my kids.
Aww.
I think, it's one of those things where you just have to, I know for me, if I'm noticing that I'm with someone who's really draining and negative, as hard as it might be, I just distance myself more and more. I just choose. I mean, we get to choose who we spend time with. We get to choose who's in our space. And it might not always be pleasant for them, but I can't do it. Listen, I grew up with
the one thing.
Yeah,
it's the one thing you can do.
You can, and
that shows them.
Yeah, and I was groomed by my mother to do everything to keep her happy, and forego my own needs. And now is a different time for me. Now it's you know what? I know what I need, and I know that being in your space doesn't serve me, doesn't help me feel good. And I'm not out to change anyone. So what I do, how I take my control back, is just distance myself.
Yeah, it can be an interesting dilemma, even in the musical space. Because I know I've got a good friend of mine that sometimes gets frustrated because sometimes you're not always as loved in your own community as you are when you go outside. So he knows that's one of his complaints, is that sometimes he feels that there's a crab in the barrel mentality with some of the musicians that exist here. So when he's looking for support, he's not getting it because he feels that they are maybe in some cases feeling that he's an outsider because he's from New York, and therefore they're doing that whole crab in the barrel kind of aspect. So I was wondering, as a musician, Vesey, is that something that you even have to deal with over there in Ohio, where there might be musicians that are not being as supportive as you would like? And how do you deal with that? And also just the business aspect of music as well.
Did you say crab in the barrel?
Yes, crab in the barrel.
I've never heard that. And so can you explain more about what that means?
Well,
because now I want to write a kid's song called Crab in the Barrel.
Hey, I like it. It could be a great kid song. The notion
Let's
is
do
that,
it.
you know, if you got a crab in the barrel, that they will try to grab you and pull you down and everything versus you getting out of the barrel and being a success. So the other crabs will pull you down, and that is why it is crab in the barrel. I think that I told
Crab
that
in the
correctly,
barrel.
Michelle. That was the abbreviated version.
Yeah, you know, when I think in childhood, when the kids get the notion that and they learn from their elders, if you will, and other children who haven't been taught right away, as soon as like it's possible through music and the arts, that you can be drugged down into other people's stuff. And the only way to get out of that is to keeping yourself. And if they make fun of you, or they don't want to hang out with you, or they call you names, or I was chastised quite a bit as a child. I made friends with wonderfully intelligent people that accepted me, and I still continued to work hard to make the ones who didn't accept me laugh. And like IPC says, and eventually we were all friends. Like IPC says about broken bones, the broken bones of humanity, and like each of our roads, and how we are like we need to help each other. We really do, you know, like however we can, but not if it's impossible. So as Michelle's saying, to step away, like I oftentimes have given much of my energy where it shouldn't have gone. And I can say now I know full and well how to, you know, do the distancing. And also I feel secure in myself and strong and rooted in the art, which has helped me so much, this guitar and the ability to write a song about, I'll interrupt like children in the grocery store with their parents who are screaming because I have to, because I'm physically like pulled that way, that tone, that sound, I can't even handle it. I go right there and I say, "Hi, I'm your friendly neighborhood songwriter. Sounds like you need a song. How can I help?" Because this little child has, and this angry parent, this little child has this parent like in a, you know, just in a nut, and they don't have the ability to like, you know what I'm saying, to get that, to redirect. So I go right there. 3 children are now taking school buses, or at least 2 of them from the school my children go to, because there was 2 little girls with whopping tears going down, mothers in nurse outfits saying, "Please, you have to go to school. You have to." "I don't want to go, you know, I don't want to go." And I had been there to drop off something from my for my children. They forgot their lunch or something. And I said, "I'm your friendly neighborhood songwriter. What is your name?" "You need a song. Don't you know how cool school is? But you have so many friends to meet. You have so much to do." And so I have these little songs that I do that I send through voice memos. I don't do them in the studio. I offer that as like if you want, like a professional recording, but it's actually like, it helps me psychologically to give the songs to people. Does that make sense? It's weird. It's kind of weird, but
oh my God, that's so awesome, Bessie.
So I'd like to offer you that, Michelle and Mark, for anybody that you know that might need a song about anything. Like, I'll put their name in it. You tell me a little bit about why you think they might need a song, and I'll just like tune in and do a 2-minute, 3-minute, like, just, "You're beautiful. We love you. You know, you're the light." Like that song, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." Like, if we all would only just remember that one, right? Because that's like the best song in the world. It's the best song.
It's one of the best songs in the world. Michelle, and actually, I'm going to wrap up very shortly. And it's been a great conversation with everybody today, including my educators, artists, and everybody else. But Michelle, as we're getting to wrap up, and I'm going to have Bessie do a song on the way out. But before we get to Bessie, I want to know, because I've been telling most people, I think I might have missed 1 or 2, to give their message of positivity, their message of hope, and all of that. So if you can leave a message of positivity and a message of hope, and also how folks can reach you on Instagram. And I didn't tell everybody this, but this goes for the 2 of you, as well as everybody else who's been on the show, because it's something that I say usually at every show. This is just like another Clubhouse as far as I'm concerned, because the International Broadcast Media has given me this platform. So anytime y'all want to come on, any of you, you're always welcome, because I have these shows on Monday and Wednesdays, 2 of them on Monday and the one on Wednesday. So anytime you feel like popping in and you're available, just let me know and I'll send you a link and we can continue these conversations on a regular basis. But Michelle, I toss it off to you first. So any words of positivity and encouragement that you would like to give our global community, because it is a global audience.
Yes, yes. Check in on yourself. Make sure that you're aware of how you're doing, because if you don't check in on how you're doing daily, or even every other day, before you know it, you won't be in a good space. So just make sure that you're aware, you're doing the self audit, and you're aware of how you're feeling, and you're reaching out and talking to a friend if you need to. And then check in on those that you love. Don't assume the ones around you who seem to be okay are okay. Just checking in on them and saying, hey, how you doing? I haven't heard from you, or I haven't seen you on social, or I know you went through something. Just check in, and don't assume other people are going to do that, because just that little bit of care could go a long way for someone if they're not getting anything from anyone else. And you can follow me on Clubhouse. I'm Mental Health Michelle, and on Instagram, Michelle Dickinson 71. So thank you so much.
Can you put that in the chat, please? Can you put that in the chat? Okay, cool.
I already followed you on Clubhouse, girl.
Oh, good. Okay. You reminded me of the song there that I wrote a long time ago. So my friend is Maidu Indian, and I said I'm a first generation American to Cody Lusich, a great filmmaker and editor. He said, no, you're not. I'm like, well, my mom's from Germany and my father's from Bulgaria. And he's like, I'm a first generation American. I'm Maidu Indian. I was like, Cody, I'm so sorry. You're right. You are. And I wrote this song called, what's it called? Roller Coaster. You had mentioned Roller Coaster. I was thinking ups and downs when you were just talking about how to check in, actually, Michelle. And about how that's my life has been like that, like really high, really low, really high. And so just this getting there and being able to like navigate has been a lifelong learning lesson. And so yeah. Why did I say that?
Well,
am I brain dumping? I don't mean to be.
No, you're doing a great job. And speaking of that, I know that definitely my cousins, actually, because I primary claim of ethnicity is African American, but I do have some European American and some Native American, and I have some cousins that claim more of the Native American side. So they're very active in the powwow circuit. So actually, my cousin Verna should be in California right about now, because I think she's doing one of those powwow competitions, because she actually wins in the fancy dance and things of that nature. Her
I love it.
Now the kids are starting to win, because she's getting closer to like the 40 and 50 age set, more, I guess closer to more to the 40s, but she's definitely still competes, and her daughters and sons compete as well, and her husband.
That's
so
awesome.
They oftentimes win and do really well. So last time I checked, they were in California, either California, Arizona, or Texas, somewhere in between the Southwest and the West Coast, because they had just come back from, I believe, Minnesota. So they do the whole. That. Oh yeah, it's amazing what they do.
Can we go?
Yeah, we can go. Maybe we'll take the Funky Eye Puppets with us. Michelle, I'm glad that you joined us. I look forward to seeing you come back in the near future, and definitely look forward to having you back. So I saw her waving off, so I'm going to let her get on out of here.
Bye, Michelle. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, but we can definitely do that. We can hopefully go really soon and everything, because I definitely believe in blending cultures and blending things along those lines. So I've actually been to, I think I've been to one powwow or a couple of powwows, but they go all the time. And I keep saying that I want to go to one of those national ones. And actually another cousin, their only brother, because they lost one of the sisters, but it's several sisters and a brother. And the brother is actually a designer. So the Wheels Hedgepeth has a Red Eye Supply, I think is the name of his company. So he designs like the native belts and outfits and things of that nature.
Oh, cool.
So he does a lot in that space. So
I want the link. Let me share that.
I will share the link on that and everything. But if we can get you to go out, or we can go out with a song, because I've actually got to get ready to go to another event.
All right.
It's been a full 3 hours plus the hour that we had with IPC. So I've had a full and wonderful day, and it's been a lot of it with you.
Mark, I love you. You're amazing. Thank
you,
Mark.
Amazing.
Thank you for having me. I guess I'll do the Maidu song. And,
Please.
Feeling good, I remember okay, here we go. Feeling good, I remember the days when we lay together in the sunlight rays. I didn't know my feelings yet. Time gone by, past pretend. Take me with you into the night. There'll be no crying, there'll be no fights. 'Cause all I want is to be with you the way that we once knew. We come from a roller coaster. Oh, I don't know. Can we get over ourselves? We come from the rough and tumble, you and me, from the lovesick jungle of fear. Addiction is a lie, I don't believe all it says that it is. Don't be shy. If you are a loner and you don't wanna own them with lies, let it fly, 'cause we're all messed up. Tired of listening to what we don't trust in a first generation. No, I'm not really a my do Indian, but I'll keep moving on until I realize why I'm singing this song, Mark Lee. We come from a roller coaster. Oh, I don't know, babe, can we get over our cell phone? Oh. We come from a rough and tumble, you and me, from the lovesick jungle of fear. 'Cause we're all gonna let it shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. I'm not gonna let anyone blow it out. I'm gonna let it shine. IBM TV, huh?
Yep, IBM TV, International Broadcast Media, is what it stands for. International Broadcast Media Television, and definitely Nick Palveda and Kim Calhoun were the founders of that. And you'll actually see at least some of them on the airplane that gets us on out of here as we end the show. But I was glad to have Bravado here with me, also known as Bessie Minks. And yes, this is Echo doing his thing as well. So definitely gonna get on out of here. I think we're gonna watch a kid try to fit a couple of baseballs and a game and everything, and then get out of here totally with what we've got with the airplane that ends our shows on a regular basis. This has been a fun 3+ hours with everybody. And of course, I had a great time doing the puppet hour earlier. So definitely that was truly amazing with the funky eye puppets and all of that. So it's been a full day and a great day. But right now, let's watch this kid try to attempt to hit these baseballs. I don't think he did a good job, but maybe Bessie will have some ideas about that as well.